Perhaps one of the most profound yet controversial topics of discussion today is that of cosmology. How do we get here, and what here really is? Our goal will be to see what the Bible, science, and history all have to say about these things and why they really matter. Welcome to the Cosmology series. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the show. This is the Dance of Life podcast, and I'm your host, Tudor Alexander. Boy, I hope that you're as excited as I am excited for this cosmology series. It's been a long time coming. We're going to be diving into some very fascinating things. I hope you enjoyed that new intro. That's going to be, it's not my intro for every episode, but it'll be the intro for this cosmology series because it's special. It's going to be a special journey, even though it's not as long as the other series that we've done. The Afterlife series was pretty long. The End Time series was pretty long. The Trinity series is pretty long. All these series had a lot of material, and this one has a lot of material too, but it's going to be very intense. It'll be about 8 episodes. And of course, that doesn't include the other 2 that I've created that are animated, that are shorter. Make sure you go check those out, why Christianity is incompatible with heliocentrism. And recently, as of the time of this video, 20 reasons why gravity is a fraud. So make sure you go check those out. They're very edifying, short videos. Share them with your friends. Hopefully get some conversations going. I know that this is a very controversial topic. With that in mind, make sure you subscribe and do so on my website. Stay connected. YouTube's been, playing nice. They've been great so far. Thanks be to God, but you just never know. Now we're getting into some, very controversial territory. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure at the very least they're going to put little flat earth warnings on my videos, and you just never know. I don't trust these people, so neither should you. So stay connected on my website, danceoflife.com. But either way, I'm so excited for this series. I hope you're excited too. Wherever you happen to be on the spectrum, my goal is to edify you and really go on an adventure together. It's going to be an adventure. It really is. And it's an adventure for me too, putting this together and presenting it to you. And, just solidifying my own knowledge of things. I've been researching this for quite a while. And of course, now it's time to really present some very important information. If you've read my statement of faith, you know what I believe about cosmology. It's one of the major teachings, right? So you have cosmology, the Sabbath, the Trinity, the afterlife, the end times, the church. What is the nature of the church? I have an animated video on this one coming out, but I've talked about it in several places. And of course, salvation. You have the 7, as far as I see it, like pillars of Christianity, 7 major teachings. And in all 7 of those areas, the beast has infiltrated various denominations and mindsets and cultures and has given its version of the truth, which is a counterfeit, of course. And this is no exception. Cosmology is one of the major teachings. And of course, it's not a salvation issue. We'll talk about this in a little bit. So it's not one of those things where you got to believe the right cosmology, otherwise you're not saved. However, there are things to consider, and we'll talk about why it matters. This is how we're beginning this journey today. Why does it matter? Why does cosmology matter? Which is a very important question. So today will be the beginning of about 8 episodes. It's going to be hopefully very fascinating. And my goal, as with all of these things, is that you end up marveling at God. No matter what you're studying, whether it's the Trinity or the Sabbath or the end times or the nature of the church or salvation or typology, it doesn't matter what you're studying. There's so many beautiful things that God has left us to study. And we are in a very rich age where we have these things at our fingertips. We can research, we can watch videos, we can listen to people talk to us while we're doing housework. And of course, these things they're novel in history. People weren't able to do that. It's like having somebody talk to you while you're doing work and teaching you and researching for you, and you can have that at your command. That's a profound luxury. So use it to learn the truth. But we're in a day and age where we can learn these things, and if your studies are not arriving you at a position where you are seeing God bigger than before, where you're marveling more than you were before at God, where you are falling in love with God even more and his brilliance, and you're just in awe after you've studied whatever you're studying, doesn't matter, then you're not doing it right, folks, as far as I'm concerned. You have to go to that point. It's like you're studying cosmology, for example. Okay, so you realize maybe you've been lied about cosmology. Okay, so what? So what? You've been lied to about everything. The question is, are these things going to help you marvel at God even more? And that's my goal, because as you will learn later in this series, the answers that we seek as to very important questions, many of them are mysteries. And that's my goal, is to reveal to you the mystery so we can marvel at it together. So I hope it's going to be edifying regardless of your position on this. And it's going to strengthen your appreciation and gratitude for God's brilliance, God's design, and just who God is. Now, really quick note for the people who are watching this video, because there are people who listen to podcasts, so this doesn't necessarily concern you. But if you're watching, you notice that I have a furry little cover on my microphone. Don't worry, I didn't kill any Fennec foxes to cover my microphone. But it is called a dead cat, which is really it's a funny name in the recording, industry, where it's basically like a furry cover that you put on a microphone. And the purpose of this furry cover, it's not to look cute, although it does look kind of cute. It's to block noise. So I have you don't see it, but I have a fan at the base of my desk, which helps to keep me cool, because especially in Arizona during the summer at the time of this recording, it gets really hot. And if the AC is not running, I am just sweating, like a pig in the heat. So basically I was like, okay, I need some way to be able to use this fan, because if it's turned up, it creates baseline noise. And if you know anything about audio recording, it makes things harder to make the quality sound. So yada, yada, yada. Anyway, that's why I have this furry cover, if you were wondering, because I know maybe some people might be wondering that. So anyway, what is the definition of cosmology? Well, the definition is, according to official definitions, the science of the origin and development of the universe. That's a very interesting definition, because it brings up certain questions. What is the universe? What do we define as the universe? What is the nature of reality? Where do we come from? How long have we been here? Where is this going? What does here, quote unquote, even look like? These are phenomenal questions. They're so fascinating and important to ask. And unfortunately, most people don't ask these questions because they are not engaging in critical thinking. They're comfortable. They're comfortable being told by an authority what these questions mean, rather than engaging reality and asking these questions and seeing where that leads them. So hopefully you are asking these questions. If you aren't, then my goal will be to encourage you and to light that spark of curiosity so that you're asking these questions, and very importantly, that you keep asking them in some sense, right? Because as you'll see, things are not what they seem, both from the traditional perspective and even from the counter narrative, which we'll talk about. But these are existential questions. Humanity has asked these for a long time, obviously. As Christians, we have the answers in the Bible as the Word of God, who is perfect, who is the source of all knowledge and wisdom, who has revealed all truth. Now, of course, he hasn't revealed every aspect about himself, because we have eternity to find out, but he's revealed everything necessary. All the things that we need, all the questions that we have can be answered in the Bible. And some of them can't be answered on this side of eternity. But nonetheless, the Bible has equipped us with the truth. And that's a very important thing. The Bible says that God, who is an uncaused caused, he's self-existent. He's the only being in the universe that is self-existent. He created all things for his glory. Genesis 1. And of course, in Colossians 1, verse 16, it tells us, "For by him all things were created in heaven, on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him." For him. And I forgot to get my little... There it is. Oops. Boy, there's so many things to do. Okay. And for him. For him, meaning the creation that was made was not just made by God, but it was made for God. Now, if you don't have a God-centered understanding of the gospel, of reality, that everything is made to reveal God's glory and to glorify God, then that will go over your head. Everything is made to glorify God. Of course, there's a audio. I don't know if it's out yet. Maybe it will be by the time this video is published. But anyway, I made an audio. You can actually find it on my website because all my encouragement audios I post automatically in the encouragement section. And on YouTube, they're scheduled out. But anyway, there's this one titled 21 Ways That Nature Reveals the Glory of God or something like that. Very interesting recording. I think it's about 20 minutes. Go listen to it. So you can see how nature gives you everything you need to know that the God of the Bible is the true God and he exists, and how that's bad news in the sense that he's just and we need a solution. So natural revelation is actually programmed and created in such a way that if you're honest with the conscience that God gave you, it reveals to you who he is perfectly. It reveals to you his qualities and his nature. And it reveals to you the need for the solution because there's bad news. Once you realize the God of the Bible is the true God, assuming you didn't know about the cross, that's really bad news. Do you understand? That's really bad news. I need a solution because if this God is the true God, then I'm done for. I'm going to be judged. How do I reconcile myself back to God? And so natural revelation is designed to reveal the glory of God, which is a profound statement. Of course, we also know from Hebrews 1 verse 3, God sustains all things. He's the radiance of the glory of God. This is Jesus and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. By the word of his power, he upholds all things, which is another profound statement of God's intimate relationship to creation. And of course, we also know from Christianity that God's coming back to destroy this worldly system, to remake the world, to bring back paradise, to lift the Genesis curse, to resurrect our bodies, and for those who believe in him to live forever with them. That's a profound reality. And it's all structured around cosmology because you can't divorce cosmology from the gospel. Again, doesn't mean it's a salvation issue to not believe the correct cosmology because a lot of people have... You don't need perfect theology to be saved. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that cosmology is not divorceable from the gospel, which is why I encourage you to watch that video, how heliocentrism is not compatible with the gospel or Christianity. Of course, these days, Christianity doesn't mean what it used to 2,000 years ago. So anyway, there's that. But go watch that video so you understand the theological problems. There's a lot of problems with the heliocentric model. There really are. We're going to really break them down in this series. But my goal is for you to focus on the head of the snake. What are the real problems that you can get at and not get lost in the weeds? This is something we'll be talking about quite a bit. So he's coming back, and all the things I just mentioned, that God is the uncaused cause, created all things. He sustains everything. It's made all for him, for his glory. He's coming back to judge everybody. All these things alone are very controversial in today's world. And if you're standing up for these things, which is the gospel, you will be ridiculed. You'll be hated. You'll be mocked. So that's very important. So there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing different in that sense. Meaning if you're standing for the truth for cosmology, of course, you're standing for any kind of truth, you're going to be ridiculed and mocked and so on. Anyway, the Bible speaks about the nature of our reality, the shape of the earth, the nature of what we see, like the sun, moons, and stars, and it makes explicit cosmological statements, which is also an important thing because these are very controversial. And a lot of people have found clever ways to get around them and still, reconcile them to a Christian faith, but you can't. You really can't. We'll be looking at that today. So I promise this series will edify you. In fact, I hope it'll blow your mind. I really do, because we're going to be looking at some very unique things that I haven't seen even people who are discussing biblical cosmology. Of course, they don't call it biblical cosmology, and that's another important point. I am not a flat earther. I'll be saying that right from the beginning. I don't identify with that movement. I don't want you to identify me with that movement. I don't want you to identify yourself as a flat earther. This series is about biblical cosmology. With that being said, I have not seen too many people discuss the things that I'm going to be discussing with you in this series. So we'll just leave it at that. As we progress, you'll know what I mean. But the point is this: if you're open to the truth, this series will reveal to you some great things. It really will. And I'm grateful to God for revealing these things to me and giving me the time and the energy to research all these things and put them all together in one place so that they're a resource for you. If you believe the mainstream version of cosmology, i.e. the heliocentric model, this series will seriously challenge your worldview with irrefutable scientific and biblical and historical evidence. It will seriously challenge and hopefully destroy that worldview. It really will, because you will see the many evils that worldview opens you up to. If you're a veteran in the biblical cosmology discussion, this series will expand what you know, and it's going to challenge you to see the mystery, which is, of course, a very deep and profound mystery. And you'll know what I mean by that when we get to talking about the problems with the circle map. So hopefully that will be very interesting for everybody, because everybody thinks that just because the earth is flat, it's a circle, but maybe it's not. Couple disclaimers. Again, I have no agenda. I'm not a flat earther. My agenda is the truth, as to the best of my ability. I am not part of any communities online with flat earth or anything like that, so don't consider me a flat earther. I don't call myself a flat earther. I believe in biblical cosmology. That's the point. That is the distinction. Just like with religious nationalism and Christian nationalism, we need better terms, folks. And what we're dealing with here is biblical cosmology. This is not flat earth. This is not flat earth movement, because those things have been compromised and infiltrated. And again, you'll see what I mean by that, hopefully, as we go through this series. But my own story, just to give you my background, everybody who's come into these beliefs, people have to remember, if you're on the side that you believe heliocentrism and you think all of this is stupid, you have to remember that people who discuss these things, the average person who has looked into, let's say, flat earth or biblical cosmology, has asked way more meaningful questions and has bothered to research physics and gravity and, NASA's hijinks much more than the average person who just accepts the heliocentric model. All those people who are quote-unquote flat earthers, or they believe in biblical cosmology, were once just like you. For example, I used to watch Star Trek religiously. I loved Star Trek. As a kid, I used to rush home and catch those episodes every day. I didn't miss a day. I love Star Trek. I love Deep Space Nine. I never got into Star Wars, even though the font for this cover was more of a Star Wars font. But I never really got into Star Wars, although I did play Star Wars for Super Nintendo, which was pretty fun. But I loved anything to do with sci-fi. Video games, movies, sci-fi stuff. I love sci-fi. Aliens, I used to watch, all kinds of movies and stuff. So I was very much into sci-fi. Then when I got into personal growth and New Age, my main goal was to hack my body with all these health hacks so that I could live long enough to where we would taste space travel and I could be on like a spaceship and just travel space forever and discover the universe. Like literally, that's what I believed in, folks. So, I laugh at it now, but this is what I believed in. I was very indoctrinated by sci-fi, by space travel, transhumanism. I definitely drank that Kool-Aid, and I'm grateful that God got me out of that and woke me up, just like the prodigal son was eating from the trough of the pigs and realized, like, what am I doing? And so I'm very grateful for that. But nevertheless, sci-fi was a very big part of my life for 20-something years, right? In 2020, I began learning, like many people, of course, because we all had time with the whole pandemic stuff. And I realized that cosmology was one of the many lies that we've been told. Many, many lies. I started with low-hanging fruit, like looking up NASA bloopers, realizing the moon landing was faked, these types of things. And I went down many rabbit holes. I spent countless hours researching, watching people's videos, watching counter arguments. In my fourth book that I wrote in 2021 called Don't Let the Devil Boil Your Frog, which is available for members, by the way. You can have a free PDF. You can read it. You can see that in 2021, I have a whole chapter dedicated to quote unquote flat Earth. But at the time, I would say I was part of a flat Earth movement. I consider myself a flat earther at that time. Today, I don't. So these things evolve over time, right? These things evolve over time, and we are sometimes bouncing back and forth. But ultimately, the point is the truth. The point is the truth, and what is the truth? What is the truth, and what does the evidence have to say about the truth? Either way, I've studied these things for many years now. It's 2024 at the time of this video. I've been studying these things intensely for 4 years. I really have. And I've realized that the Bible is right. The Bible teaches an enclosed cosmology. Heliocentrism is a profoundly vast conspiracy, and I have a whole episode. Episode number 6 in this series will be dedicated to the heliocentric conspiracy, which will probably be an extremely long episode. I'm going to do it in parts, but we'll see how it goes. It's going to be a documentation from ancient times all the way to modern of historical developments and how this conspiracy has become solidified in the minds of people. And you will see profound evidence after evidence after evidence, scientific and historical, that this is indeed one of the biggest conspiracies there is, because there is much to gain for the enemy by convincing you of a wrong cosmology. There's much to gain. So anyway, I've studied these things quite a bit, and in my studies I've also realized, like I said, that the flat Earth movement is a psyop, and I'll be talking about that in this series. But the most important thing that I've realized, and that I want to share with you in this first episode, is that cosmology is not a scientific issue. It is in some sense. Like, there's science that we can discuss and that we will discuss even today. But cosmology, you have to understand, if you can walk away with one thing from this particular episode titled, Why Does Cosmology Matter? Or Why Cosmology Matters, Biblical Cosmology, it's because cosmology is a spiritual issue. This is what you need to understand. This is the answer to today's question. Cosmology is a spiritual issue, folks. It's not a scientific issue. It is in some sense, like there's science behind it, but really what it really boils down to is it's a spiritual issue. What you believe about cosmology determines other things that you believe and how susceptible you are to the mystery religion, which, by the way, is coming to the forefront. If you're passive, you're believing a religious doctrine. Either way, you have to accept a spiritual belief system. Do you understand? This is the profound revelation. You either go with what the Bible says, and that's a spiritual belief system because it comes from God. And it's related to spiritual things like the second coming of Christ, the nature of our reality, our relationship to God physically in the universe. These are spiritual issues. Of course, they have science behind them, not for everything, because we can't explain certain things. We live in a supernatural realm. We really do. That's another thing that hopefully you'll gain from this series, is appreciating how supernatural this existence is and just marveling at God. But it's a spiritual issue. Whether you believe the biblical version or you believe the snake's version, these are spiritual issues with spiritual consequences. One is the authority of God, one is the authority of Satan. Now, if that sounds crazy to you and you believe in heliocentrism and you think it's crazy to say it's of Satan, hopefully you will indulge me. I really hope you will. The purpose of science is ultimately for you to marvel at God. That is why science exists. That's why God gave us an analytical mind to be able to analyze things. That's why he gave us 5 senses. He gave us these things so that we could discover him and discover his brilliance. Our existence here is a miracle. It's supernatural. We don't even know how life works. We still don't know. We can map the cell and look at all these little gears and mitochondria and pathways and genetic nuclei and stuff like that, but we cannot figure out how all of these proteins just come into being, in the sense of like, okay, they're inanimate things. They're protein sequences and they're, cell walls. They're all of these inanimate objects, and then suddenly they come together in this little unit that is sentient, pretty much. I mean, it's moving around on its own. It's got its little program. It lives and it dies, and it communicates with other little things, and they create organ systems. Like, how does that work? That's a mystery, folks. It's such a profound mystery. And if you realize that, then, arguing for a mysterious reality shouldn't be that difficult. However, the problem is that science in the last 500 years has especially been weaponized against God, against the truth, because of the Counter-Reformation by the Jesuits. And it's been about reducing the mystery. They tell you what it is. Oh, it's this and it's that. And, look, this is how this works. This is how the tides work. This is how the moon is. And, oh, it's just there. And it's this. And then it's got this diameter and it's going this speed. Oh, okay. I guess that's how it works. It's designed to reduce the mystery and ultimately to separate you from God, because the true cosmology, God is very close. And that's significant. And he's also above. He's the Most High, which is a point that God created the universe with him relating on top of everybody so that everybody knows who the king is. Of course, science has been very antichrist, and that's unfortunate. So our goal will be also to return to biblical science, to understand science as it is supposed to be, which is to help you marvel at God. Science is great. I love science. I think you should be scientific. The scientific method is a good thing. Asking questions, doubting, testing your hypothesis. These things are good things. I'm not anti-science. I'm against propaganda. And of course, hopefully by now you realize that science is not immune from the devil's schemes. People think we have it all figured out, folks, and we don't. It's the opposite of science. It's like, oh, the science is settled. Or all these types of, sayings, the science is this, the science is settled. The science is never settled, folks. Science, the very nature of science is to continually ask questions. If science was a person, it would be doubting Thomas. I need to see, I need to measure it. Let me test it again. Science is constantly asking questions. And if you are demonized for questioning the heliocentric model and saying, look, this just doesn't make sense scientifically, then that's not science. The truth doesn't fear investigation. God created science. He created physics. He created chemistry. He created the analytical mind. He created the constants of the universe, biology. All of these things point to him, and they're designed for you to discover him through the natural world. But it's been hijacked, it's been hijacked by the enemy, and to ultimately, again, separate you from God, and also, very important, to redirect you into a counterfeit spiritual paradigm. It's always about two things, folks. Spirit of Antichrist. Openly against Christ. Anti. In place of Christ. The openly against, is designed to push you to the in place of. The bad cop is designed to make the good cop look like the solution. This is how it works. And with cosmology, you'll see the same pattern. You'll see the same exact pattern that you see everywhere else with dark to light. A good example, which we'll talk about much later in the heliocentric conspiracy, is quantum mechanics and how that has allowed the fusion of New Age, of scientism, transhumanism, all of this false light stuff into science, which was very atheistic before the 19th century, which is very interesting. So that's been a little dark to light. So why is biblical cosmology important? That's another important question to ask. Well, biblical cosmology is not simply that God created the earth. This is a very important distinction that you have to take away from today. Biblical cosmology is not that simply God created the earth. You can't be a Christian unless you believe that God created the earth, so that's, very low standard. Biblical cosmology is much more than that. It's committing to the full truth about what the Bible says about reality and its implications. That is biblical cosmology. Because there's many people, which we'll talk about, like, for example, Answers in Genesis, that are creationists. Oh, I'm a creationist. I believe biblical cosmology. Well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean simply that you're reading Genesis 1 literally? That God created the earth in 6 days? Okay, good job. But God didn't create a ball spinning in space. Very important. So most people that say biblical cosmology mean, well, I'm a creationist, right? Mainstream, at least. My challenge to you is to embrace the full meaning of that, which is what God created, not just that he created the earth in 6 days. Again, cosmology is not a salvation issue. like, believing in the propitiatory atonement of Christ or the deity of Christ. Those are serious issues. But cosmology is used to attack the Bible, to attack the legitimacy of God's word, to distract Christians with false signs and wonders, sci-fi and New Age and all kinds of stuff. It's used as an ecumenical point because we have a globe, right? We have to unite the globe and, we have to basically do this thing. Otherwise, humanity's going to perish. But if you have the correct cosmology, God is right above, folks. He's very close by and he's coming back right through the sky. The sky's going to open up and he's coming back to his creation. But if you believe the ball, then, well, where is God exactly? I mean, okay, you can imagine he's everywhere, but at the same time, there's no physical location, right? And this is the point. By distancing you from God with an endless void, that's the dark. The light is we need to take care of this planet. We need to be the one to unite the world in peace. Otherwise, we're going to destroy our home. We need climate change action. We need, all this kind of stuff. That's the dark that leads to the light. It's the same strategy, folks, as everything else, if you've watched any of my recent news updates. So it's used as an ecumenical point, and it's also used to justify the mark of the beast, which I've talked about, which is Sunday rest, which is, of course, one of the angles will be through climate change. The climate change agenda, which has become a moral issue now. As of recently, last couple of years, it's gone from being a secular issue to a moral issue. And just like physics has gone quite a while now, for about 100 years, it went from being atheistic to now it's a kind of new agey. You'll see what I mean by that as we progress. But everything is going from dark to light, and it's becoming because the Bible tells you that the mystery religion will be manifest. The mystery religion will be manifest. And this heliocentric lie is one of the main spiritual beliefs of the mystery religion. So hopefully you'll realize that. And when you know the truth sets you free, right? It breaks the Babylonian spell of manipulation, of distraction, of fear. For example, let's take a look at some of the spells that people are under. Climate change. If you realize the truth about cosmology, you are no longer a slave to this lie about climate change. Of course, you don't need to know the truth about cosmology because climate change is easy to be refuted, but it's a stronger position. You realize, this is just total nonsense. Atheism, another deception created by the Jesuits through the French Revolution. Why? Because God exists right above. If you understand biblical cosmology, that is an avenue to realize that, wow, God is real. He exists. But if you're in this, ball in the middle of an endless void that has a reason why it got there through a Big Bang and evolution, well, maybe there is no God. The multiverse is another sci-fi trap that people get into with endless possibilities, and this is one of many universes, and maybe in another universe you're evil, and maybe in that one you're good, maybe Hitler's really good in that one. All these fantasies and fairy tales that people fantasize, and of course they use that to promote a very relativistic world. Aliens is another one, of course. Alien invasions, alien movies, alien whatever. If you've looked into aliens and people calling out to Jesus during alien abductions, there's much more to the story, folks. Aliens are demons. They're demonic experiences that are happening because a lot of the times sleep paralysis is an issue, and sleep paralysis is very linked to demonic oppression. Not that you're possessed, but demons can infiltrate you in your dreams and terrorize you. And certainly there's evidence to that, because once you realize true cosmology, you realize there's no little green men from Mars, folks. You realize the aliens are fallen angels and demons of some kind that are messing with people for various reasons. Of course, it also breaks the spell of sci-fi entertainment. That's another woven thread that the mystery religion has put into culture, especially with Hollywood. No space, no sci-fi, no distractions. Transhumanism is another one. Of course, that's a counterfeit eternal life that the devil offers you. And a lot of people are sold into it. I was sold into it. Look, I don't judge anybody, but that is one spell that is immediately broken once you have correct cosmology. Sci-fi cataclysms, asteroids, comets, alien invasions, all these crazy scenarios that, of course, they're selling to you in order to what? That's the dark. We need what? The light, which is a new world order to unify under peace and to have a world system of some kind. These are just fear tactics. Because if you know the true cosmology, you know that there's a firmament that protects us. There's nothing coming in. Of course, if God wants to drop all the stars from the sky, which Revelation does announce at the end of time, that's going to happen. But there's no giant meteor coming, it's going to come and hit the ocean and there's this cataclysmic, thing. This is fake. It's fake news. Overpopulation is another thread that they love to put in for New World Order stuff. Isaiah 45:18 says, "For thus says the Lord who created the heavens, he is God, who formed the earth and made it. He established it, he did not create it empty, he formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord and there is no other." So God made the earth to be inhabited, meaning this narrative of overpopulation is a scam. Of course it's a scam. God made the earth. The earth is immense, folks. The earth could sustain double the population that we have now. These are lies. But of course, the problem is that the snake is in control of all of these world systems, and it's caused gross inequality between people. And instead of using things rightly and using nature to feed ourselves and to do good things, the Genesis curse is at a maximum. That's why you have the illusion that, man, this is just not working out. There's too many people. Nonsense. It's nonsense. God made the earth to be inhabited. And of course, if you know true cosmology, you realize, this is just nonsense. Scarcity, of energy, of resources, of whatever. The earth is abundant. It's made to sustain life indefinitely, folks. The earth was not made for a temporary purpose. Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. Revelation 21. What does that mean? That means God intended for this earth to be forever. So if he's going to create something that's going to be forever, imagine that it's abundant and it's more than capable of sustaining life forever. It's not, you're not going, the lie is that, look, you're going to do something and you're going to foil God's plans. That's really what it is. Climate change, we got to do something. And this is how the devil gets you. And of course, people are deceived. They're deceived on cosmology. On top of that, they're also deceived by salvation because they're synergists in some form or fashion, whether they're Arminian Protestants or they're full-on works-based Catholics, doesn't matter, or some other religion which is synergistic. You add those two lies together, synergism plus false cosmology, what do you get? Well, you get total delusion. You get all these people that are frothing at the mouth for climate change, that we need to have a day of rest on Sunday. Otherwise, we're going to, destroy this planet. What are you talking about? That's not going to happen. The Bible doesn't say such a thing. It doesn't say that God would allow you to destroy yourself. He's the one that's Alpha and Omega. He's the one that's going to be doing the destroying. So anyway, these things are all narratives that are fighting against you, folks. All these narratives are constantly in the limelight, designed to oscillate you and push you from dark to light. And all of them, of course, disappear like smoke in the wind when you realize the truth. Heliocentrism has the signature of the spirit of Antichrist, like I mentioned, with the open and against, against Christ, anti meaning, and the in place of Christ meaning, counterfeit. You have atheism and evolution, which are very openly Antichrist. And then there's things that are counterfeits, like aliens, like Pleiadians that are coming to help humanity with false light, sci-fi, quantum ascension, New Age, transhumanism, all these things. This is false light, that we can ascend and be like God and have eternal life, and so on and so forth. So heliocentrism has the signature of the spirit of Antichrist, and that should be a red flag for you if you believe in heliocentrism. The goal of heliocentrism, that has many goals, but it's to diminish God in many ways, to diminish creation. Oh, look, we're nothing. Look at you. Those old ancient views where everybody thought they were the center of the universe. That's so egotistical. No, it's not egotistical, because God is right on top. God is right on top, and we are his creation. That's what the Bible says. We're special creation because we were made exclusively to worship God. So yes, we are special. We were made. The Bible has an entire section, Genesis 2, on the creation of man, which people unfortunately believe is a separate narrative, but it's not. And we'll get into that at some other point, I think. But the point is this: we are special, but we're not special because we're in and of ourselves. We're special because God made us to worship him. Do you see how our specialness is directly tied to God? So heliocentrism tries to diminish that. Of course, it's got the mark of the devil all over it. You're nothing. You're just, the famous, what is it? oh, the speck of Earth. I forget who took it now. I think it was the quote unquote Hubble telescope or whatever forgery they're doing. But the speck of dust in the void, and that's you. All the wars, all the things. Just look how meaningless it is. And of course, it's covered with false humility. Like, look, be humble. We're nothing. But really, it's just designed to destroy you. It's designed to destroy your relationship with God by making him far away and diminishing our role in creation as being a special role, which it is special. It's not random. It's not meaningless. It's highly, highly purposeful. Why? Because we were made in the image of God. We were made in the image that God chose to take on through Jesus so that we could be like God through his power. He would conform us to his will, and we would be able to worship God. That's the most meaningful purpose that you can have, is to be like God. Of course, the devil offers you the counterfeit. He separates you from God, then he gives you the counterfeit through transhumanism and quantum new age and all kinds of nonsense. Transhumanism, quantum new age, endless sci-fi distractions, Pleiadians, new age religions, different dimensions, ancient aliens. All these things are narratives that are constantly in people's mind. Look, again, I'll give you a little story. When I was in my Jesuit high school, we had a scripture class in sophomore year, and we were reading the Bible, and I would never read the Bible, what they were reading. I remember like studying, Ezekiel's vision of the throne of God, and I was thinking like, oh man, this is aliens and ancient aliens. This is what really was exciting to me at that point in time in high school. And of course, everybody's deceived by these things because they're very seductive if you don't have an objective anchor for truth. You also tend to see in the cosmology discussion, especially heliocentrism as a spiritual belief system, you see desire and fear. You see the dualistic manipulation again. Again, to me, these things, you don't need to be a science expert. You don't need to even know a lot of history. You just need to know the patterns. Become good at recognizing patterns. It has the spirit of Antichrist all over it, with against Christ and introducing you to the counterfeit. It also has the duality of desire and fear manipulation, which is, again, the Bible tells you don't go to the left or to the right. The devil's job is to use duality to push you to the left or to the right. If he can't get you with desire, he'll get you with fear. For example, with sci-fi, people want immortality, space exploration, life on other planets, all these fairy tales. Again, I believe these things myself. On the other side, you've got frightening you with comets, with climate change, alien invasions, catastrophes, the sun exploding, the moon running into the earth, all these types of nonsense things that are not even based on science. They really aren't. They're based on a lie. There's the fear of being alone in a giant void, that we have to take control of our destiny. The only way, otherwise we're going to be extinct. And nobody will know the better because, life is meaningless. There's the fear of, like I said, all these things that I just said, like with alien invasions, climate change, and so on, which leads to taking control of your salvation, i.e. taking control of the world, making a new world order, and so on and so forth. God could have chosen, let's put it this way, God could have chosen to make a giant void of space. He could have chosen to, he could do anything he wanted to. He could have done that. But he made reality in such a way that we would know that we are physically close to him, and also that he is above us. As the heavens are above the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways. Meaning, there's a vertical gradient of orientation to this reality. If reality is created to reveal the glory of God and to reveal our relationship to God, then reality is objective in the sense that there's a ground and there's a sky and there's a vertical gradient. And the person at the top is God, Most High. So it reveals his sovereignty. It reveals how far above of us he is. It also reveals his mercy because he condescended and became human and bridged that gap, that enormous, infinite gap. Which you look at the sky, people have hypothesized about the distance of the sky, whatever the firmament, but when you look at it, it looks infinite. It looks like, wow, man, that's how high God's ways are higher than our ways, like incomprehensibly. And yet, he became human. So all these things are designed to reveal his glory. Physical reality was not just designed just willy-nilly. It was designed very intentionally to constantly point you to God, to his nature, to your relationship with him. Of course, the devil doesn't want you to think about these things, so he has created a major conspiracy in the last 500 years especially. But God could have made an infinite universe in the sense of a void. I believe the universe is infinite. We'll talk about that. But he could have made a void in space, but he didn't. He made it very intentionally to reveal his nature and to reveal our relationship to him. Either way, the point is that you see the classic dualistic pattern of fear and desire that you see in all other gaslighting and deceptions and dialectics and dark to light that you see everywhere else. That's what you see with the heliocentric model, and you see the spirit of Antichrist also. So, conclusion, what is the conclusion? Well, the conclusion is that this is from the devil, folks. You don't even need my cosmology series. Just look very plainly at it. But we're going to get into some very interesting things. Heliocentrism also, another point to add to all this Antichrist stuff, is that it has elements of the forbidden fruit. In Genesis 3, when the devil tempted Eve, we can extract certain principles from that temptation event to realize what the mindset, the spirituality of the snake is. What is the attitude? What is the strategy, right? And there's certain things. For example, you can't trust God's word. Did God say that? So you can't trust God's word. You can't trust God's character because he knows that when you eat of the fruit, you're going to be just like him. You're going to be no good from evil. Therefore, he's hiding it from you, i.e., you can't trust God's character. So you can't trust God's word. God is not good. And you can be the one that determines good from evil, i.e., God is not sovereign. You can choose free of his influence. These lies are alive and well today, folks. And when you recognize one or two or all three, like the heliocentric model, if you recognize all three of these lies in any particular teaching, then you will know that it's from the devil. Very clear. Heliocentrism is all about the forbidden fruit. God is not sovereign. How do you know that? Well, I should say, how do you know that it teaches that? Well, you have comets, aliens, the sun exploding, climate change, with all these things that are going to happen, and you never know. We might be destroyed. Versus the Bible tells you God created the earth for his glory. He's not going to allow you to destroy it, and certainly he's not going to destroy it unless he's going to judge the earth. Everything is highly intentional. But in the heliocentric model, God is not actually sovereign. It's very important. God's word can't be trusted according to the heliocentric model because the Bible is wrong. The Bible, you will see, makes explicit cosmological statements. And in the next episode to this series, we're going to be looking very deep dive into many Bible verses, some that are not so good to use, and some that are very good to use, and what to actually focus on, because it's easy to get lost in the weeds. But the point is that the Bible makes contradictory statements to the heliocentric model, or I should say the other way around. The heliocentric model contradicts the Bible, because the Bible is the truth. So the point is, either you believe what the Bible says, that things were happening all in 6 days, and the sun, moon, and stars were created after the earth, or you believe heliocentrism, that the sun, moon, and stars were created before the earth, and things happened over quadrillions of years or whatever. So one or the other. So if you believe heliocentrism, it means you're not trusting God's word. Do you see the point? And of course, the last portion, which is a little more subtle, is that God really isn't good. How does that figure? Well, God put you in a giant void, fending for your life, and it's up to you, and he's really far away. You don't really know where he's at, even though the Bible says he's right above, he's the Most High, but in the heliocentric model, he's nowhere to be found. So he's far away, and you're all alone in this chaotic universe, and it's up to you, and you got to fend for yourself. God is not good if he would have done that. And of course, he wouldn't have. We wouldn't have ever done such a stupid thing, because God is perfect. Heliocentrism is not only nonsensical, but it wouldn't ever be created because it doesn't work. So God isn't good. God can't be trusted. God is not sovereign. These are the underlying signatures of the heliocentric model, and that's how you know. Again, without having to do a lot of research, but we will, that this particular spiritual system is from the devil. Now, today's cosmology is heliocentrism. That is the main thing people believe in, but it's neither scientifically accurate nor in alignment with the Bible. And a couple of things that we can look at just to get the conversation going is some interesting little videos let's see what we got here. Ken Ham.
The word evolution is a slippery word. When someone says, do you believe in evolution? I say, what do you mean? It's got 6 different meanings. First would have to be cosmic evolution, the Big Bang. Where did time, space, and matter come from? Then you have to get chemical evolution. There's 92 naturally occurring elements. How do you get gold, silver, and platinum out of hydrogen gas? Then you got to have stars evolving, stellar evolution. Nobody has ever seen a star form. Then you have to have organic evolution. Life has to somehow come from non-living matter. Then you have to have macroevolution, where an animal changes from one kind into another. Nobody's ever seen these first 5. The Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago. And then this first life form that came out of the soup had to somehow transform itself into everything else today. So that little amoeba, single-celled creature, turned into a whale and a giraffe and a pine tree and everything. Look, you guys can believe what you want, but don't call that science. Evolution is not part of science. It's a religious belief.
It is a religious belief, and you'll see why, because it has to do with the Antichrist idea that basically you can have eternal life outside of God. That's what it's about. But just a couple things to get the ball rolling here. Let's see, what is this one about? Planes buried under 250 feet of snow and ice in less than 50 years demonstrate the flawed nature of the so-called something. Let's see. Oh, and it's not, there's no sound. These things default to no sound. Let's see. There it is. So just more evidence against evolution.
In 1942, 6 P-38 fighter planes and 2 B-17 bombers were forced to land on the ice of Greenland. The planes were abandoned and practically forgotten. Nearly 40 years later, a search was made to recover the planes, but they weren't located until 1988, when advanced radar spotted them 250 feet beneath the surface. This diorama depicts the recovery of one of the P-38 fighters. In 1992, an expedition bored a hole into the ice and retrieved the plane piece by piece. Now known as Glacier Girl, this plane has been restored and was flown once again in 2002. The fact that these aircraft were buried under more than 250 feet of ice and snow in less than 50 years reveals the unreliability of using so-called annual layers as a dating method. The borehole from the Lost Squadron expedition revealed far more than 50 annual layers because multiple layers can form every year. Observational science supports the biblical timeline and challenges popular teaching about millions of years.
Yeah, so the point is that geology is not science anymore. Well, science is not science anymore, folks, and I hate to say it. You have to do your research, and ultimately what you have to realize, this is another important point for this entire series. What are your assumptions? What information are you assuming? You have to assume something in order to proceed forward with a particular test of a theory or a hypothesis to create, an idea about something. You have to assume things. You always have to assume. I'm going to assume that the Bible's right. If the Bible's right, then therefore, X, Y, Z. If you assume the evolutionary model and you assume that it's just happened, even though without questioning those assumptions, then you're going to look at something like this and say, oh, that took probably, 50 million years, right? When in fact, it probably took 50 years. So there's so many examples like this, like with Mount St. Helens, I believe, erupted in the 80s. There was a gorge that was formed. And people like Ken Ham and stuff talk about it all the time, but there was a gorge that was formed that literally, like if you just came to this thing and you looked at it, you're like, wow, this probably took, 200,000 years or 200 million years or whatever, because it looks kind of like the Grand Canyon. Of course, it's much smaller than the Grand Canyon, but it's a similar type of structure. When in fact, that thing happened like in a day or two because the land was just cleared out and there was all these layers created and so on. So we don't know anything about anything. We really don't. We think we do. But again, all of these scientific models are structured around an Antichrist spiritual belief. And by carrying those assumptions, they produce all sorts of wonky numbers and data that you have to question. So question your assumptions. Let's see. There's another one here. Oh, that's right. This is from Hidden Truth About Dinosaurs.
In Glen Rose, Texas, they've got a river running through town called the Paluxy River. Back in 1908, the river flooded, ripped off a 2-foot layer of limestone and moved it 20 miles downstream. Underneath was another layer of limestone, so it's no big deal. But that layer underneath...
Look at this footprint. It's like a giant triceratops.
...contained hundreds of dinosaur footprints. Roland Bird was in charge of the group of guys digging out the tracks, and he reported there were 15 to 20-inch long, clearly defined human footprints with the dinosaur tracks. One of the best human tracks still had the dermal ridges, like the fingerprints on the toes. You could see them, they were extremely clear for the first few months. We sell castings of one of the human tracks. It's a size 24. The man
giant. Now, interesting, what I find interesting is that the toes here are actually much, they're 5 toes. They're not 6 toes. So if you know that, which is very interesting, but this is a size 24 foot.
Stride between steps was about 6 or 7 feet. I would rip my britches every time trying to do that. They sawed one of the tracks across the toes. Looking at it endways, you could see there were depressions where the toes had squeezed the mud down, distorting the lamination lines. These are not carved in, they're not erosion marks, they're compression prints, quite obviously. This guy said, finding dinosaur and human footprints together would counter evidence that humans evolved long after dinosaurs. I agree. And would back up the claim that all species, including man, were created at one time. I agree. It sure would back up that claim. They don't want that claim to get out. In Glen Rose, Texas.
Yeah, they certainly don't, because the entire house of cards would fall to the ground. So where do we go with this? Well, look, evolution is nonsense. It really is. If you understand genetics and how things, yes, they adapt, meaning they become externally more varied. There are certain adaptations that happen. They change, absolutely, but that's not what's happening internally. Internally, you are actually losing information. The original kinds that God created were the most robust genetically, and over time, as they proliferated across the earth, there's different environmental conditions, they specialized, and certain kinds look like this, certain kinds like that. Like, for example, maybe you've never thought of this, but if you look at a kangaroo and you look at like a hare, they're the same kind. Hares and kangaroos are the same kind. Kangaroos are obviously much bigger, but they come from the same kind. The Bible doesn't talk about species, genus, all these different distinctions which they have created in order to justify evolution and natural evolution by natural selection, which is impossible because genetic information over time decreases. It doesn't increase. There's a kind, you can get, for example, poodles from wolves, but you can't take poodles and create wolves later because wolves are the original kind. They have the most genetic diversity. And so when you have a poodle that it's been specialized, look at all these poor dog breeds. They're so cute, but each of them have so many problems because they've been so specialized. The original kind, a dog that was like a wolf, didn't have any of these problems. They didn't have cancers. They didn't have hip problems. They didn't have, whatever, all these different issues, skin issues, whatever, stomach issues. These are because the dogs have been so specialized, and a dog today, like a poodle, has much less genetic robustness and variety compared to, for example, a wolf that had the original kind gene. And that's why, by the way, you can have an entire human race coming from humankind coming from 2 people. Adam and Eve were completely perfect. They had the full genome. They had everything. They were the templates. And from there, you had basically, that's why, by the way, people could marry their sister 3,000-4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, and it wasn't a big problem. But of course, eventually it became a problem, and that's why it was outlawed. But in the beginning, you had to reproduce, and it was fine to marry your sister. People didn't consider it an issue. Like when Adam and Eve had children, they had tons and tons of children. And they had to go forth and reproduce, and the children married within themselves, and it was not a genetic issue because everybody was incredibly robust, and the command was to reproduce. So these things you can look into these things yourself. Evolution by natural selection is absolute nonsense. You can look into things like synthetic fossils where they've created literally an indistinguishable fossil that looks just like the real thing in 24 hours, synthetically. Look into that. The fossil record confirms the biblical account of the flood. All the fossils that exist, like the fossil beds, all these creatures are there from different, they're like pterodactyls, elephants, all kinds of creatures are in the same spot, meaning they got killed at the same time. They didn't pile on each other. It confirms the biblical account of a flood that just wiped everything out. And a lot of these, by the way, are fossils because water and sediment covered them immediately and mineralized them, as opposed to the notion that, for example, a fish dies and it goes to the bottom of the ocean, then it fossilizes over millions of years. Like, that's nonsense. Have you seen anything go to the bottom of the ocean and just stay there? People, or I should say, the creatures there eat it immediately. Nothing goes to waste, folks. So the idea of fossils exist, obviously, and certainly there's been many forgeries too, but fossils exist. Dinosaurs, the term dinosaur is not, people used to call them dragons before the dinosaur term was made up in the 1800s to justify evolution. They're dragons. They're giant lizards that existed, and they existed alongside man. You look at every ancient culture, they have legends of dragons for a reason. In fact, I believe even there's a Roman story of them trying to attack a camp. Was it the Greeks or the Romans? I forget. I didn't cite it, but you can look into these things. There are accounts of ancient cultures interacting with giant dragons, giant lizards of some kind, whether you want to call them a pterodactyl or a T-Rex or whatever else. They're giant lizards, and people call them dragons. And there are accounts of people dealing with such things, even, I believe, into the last 2,000 years. But of course, these things have become very mysterious, and we don't know fully about them. But evolution is wrong. And so if evolution is wrong, then if you can at least get over that hump and realize how ridiculous it is, then what is the next step? And that's how I would approach anybody who believes in heliocentrism. Ultimately, let's look at evolution first and see how that's complete nonsense. It's impossible. Things do not get better over time. They actually get worse because of the Genesis curse, and you lose information. Even though on the outside, they're changing qualities and physical appearances, that doesn't mean anything. They're not getting better. That's the lie. Look, it's changing. Okay, what does that mean? Is that changing for the good or for the worse? Dogs have changed quite a bit over a short period of time, mind you, because of intentional breeding. And are they better? No, they're worse, actually. Yes, I love wiener dogs. I love, basset hounds. I love all kinds of dogs, German shepherds. I love dogs. They're super cute. But they are way, way unhealthy and worse off than they were as wolves. Wolves, if you've ever seen a wolf, like a true wolf, wolves are huge. They're robust. They're powerful. They don't have diseases. They don't have, all these issues. They're robust creatures because they have more genetic information. So evolution is nonsense. So that's the way I would attack it first is, look, you believe that nothing exploded into something, that an explosion led to order, that Earth is just in this vast void where God is nowhere to be found, that Earth is in a constant danger from asteroids and aliens and comets and external threats and so on, that Earth is in scarcity because it's the only planet in the solar system, and we can't find any other ones to go to, and even if we did, we couldn't really travel to them. I mean, it's just like, it takes more faith to believe and to stay optimistic in that worldview than what the Bible simply tells you. That this is an enclosed cosmology. God is sovereign. He has a predetermined plan for his glory. He's going to return. He's going to live here with us forever in a renewed creation. Why would you want to believe the counterfeit? It just blows my mind. It really does. And Christians try to reconcile these blatantly antichrist lies with the Bible, and they're only caving to the beast. The Bible is a revelation about a supernatural God, folks. It is not limited to the scientific method. Very important to understand a distinction here. The Bible is not a scientific investigation into a particular topic. Like you would, what makes that leaf green outside? Or why does this do what it is? Let me investigate. Oh, this hypothesis is wrong. This one's right. Let me do this test. That's not what the Bible is. The Bible is not a scientific investigation. It's not a scientific report. It is a revelation. It is a perfect revelation from a perfect being about his nature and who he is and what he intends to do. It's not a manual for every scientific thing under the sun, but it gives you explicit statements about the reality you're in for a purpose. God created the world, science, facts, math, analytical mind. Everything is to appreciate this revelation, not to use what you've been given to discredit the revelation, to try to reconcile it with the devil's lies, and so on and so forth. So we do not limit the Bible to our own limited understanding of science, because our understanding of science is nothing. We think we're so smart. We think we're so clever. Look at the ancients who built pyramids, man. and built all these crazy structures. We can't even do that today. So the illusion, it's always the illusion that we're doing good, we're getting better, look how smart we are, look how this is from the devil, folks. Because it gives you a false sense of security in your own position. But the reality is that we're not really that smart. We really don't know that much about science compared to even ancient cultures. Ancient cultures were definitely very advanced. Who knows what they were using? Of course, they were also very corrupt, and you had a pagan. So don't get me wrong, I'm not glorifying Tartaria or, some ancient New World Order. My point is, we're not as smart as we think we are. And what that means is you can't limit the Bible to your limited understanding of science. We really can. We don't understand science as much as we should. So we can't limit the Bible to our understanding of science. And you'll also see that there's a lot of science for biblical cosmology, a lot more science than heliocentrism, which is not based on science. It's a religious belief. It's a spiritual understanding. So in this series, my goal will be for you to learn that the Bible says the Bible and heliocentrism are irreconcilable. They're opposites of one another. The Bible does teach a flat and motionless earth, and every ancient culture believed the same thing to one degree or another. The Greeks made a huge error with Eratosthenes. If you don't know who that is, then you'll learn. But Eratosthenes is pretty famous, and everybody who is into the heliocentric model loves to bring it up. Look, we knew that the earth was a ball since 3,000 years ago or whatever. Not true. Eratosthenes has a fatal error in his experiment, and it's very easy to refute. So if that's wrong, then what does that mean? You'll also learn there's no science behind the heliocentric model, just math and false assumptions. Heliocentrism was created by the powers of this world, i.e. the snake, to further the New World Order agenda. And of course, that agenda is coming to a head right now. And it's also been a conspiracy since at least 500 BC. Since at least, I'm willing to venture probably before that, but we're going to document it since Pythagoras. You're also going to learn why the current flat earth model of a circle map and in the flat earth movement and all this kind of stuff is compromised and why it's not correct. The last episode in this series will look at why heliocentrism is not compatible with the gospel, which will be kind of like the animated video I created, but it's going to be more of a deep dive with scriptures and things like that. Now, what this series is not designed for, very important so that you have the right expectations. It's not designed to give you proof after proof after proof of every single possible point about cosmology. It's really not. And it's going to be very comprehensive, I can guarantee you that, but it's not going to address every single topic. We're going to cover many proofs and arguments, and we're going to do so in this episode as well. But it's not designed to address every single debate issue. My goal is that you learn the core things and the things that are just globe killers, and then you use that to further your own education on this topic and to marvel at what you learn. It's easy to get lost in the weeds in this particular debate with things like flight path, the size and position of the sun, the age of the earth, explaining eclipses, the phase of the moon, the seasons, the tides, volcanoes, International Space Station shenanigans, satellites, the Arctic sun, the Antarctic sun, the sun in the clouds, time zones, many other trivial issues. These are all trivial, folks. It sounds like they're not trivial, but they really are trivial. The main things are much more easy to discuss, and they're much more lethal to the heliocentric model. You can research these on your own. Just be aware that they're not the basis. They're not the basis for your argumentation. And they really aren't. Because it's very easy to get lost in clever arguments. And there's a lot of clever globers out there, heliocentrists, who have very clever ways of responding to these things and showing you videos and photos and saying, look, this is actually what's happening. And they get in your mind and you do not question your assumptions. This is the point. If you don't question your assumptions, the spell is cast. So you have to learn to question your assumptions. I was going to say you have to learn to cast your spell. Don't do that. You have to learn to question your assumptions so the spell is not cast on your mind. But you can research things on your own. A lot of stuff is censored, like on YouTube especially. That's why I said just subscribe on my website for this particular stuff, because on YouTube, you can't find anything related to cosmology. It's crazy. In fact, actually, I was trying to find a video had watched on, flat earth stuff, cosmology, whatever. And it wasn't even in my history. They deleted it from my history, which is really interesting. So go to places like BitChute, IFERS forum, IFEERS. The Flat Earth Wiki is good. Decimal Z on YouTube has a lot of great videos. He has some, we're going to be looking at some of them today, but he has a lot of experiments that are going to be really good to edify yourself with that he's done. He's a very scientific guy. Although he does believe in the circle map, and I've tried to talk to him about it. And of course, that's a very controversial point. So we're going to be getting into that a little bit later. But either way, you get some good resources. Do your own homework. My goal is to edify you with the main things that matter. Because, of course, the head of the snake is things like the horizon, water, gravity, and the gospel. Now, really quick, I'm going to post my references for this series at the end when I'm finished. So we're going to be using some of those references I just mentioned, like from Decimal Z, Flat Earth Wiki, and so on. You'll be able to use these references for your own research and cross-reference them and go deeper if you want, although I don't post these until the end of the series, so that's very important. But the real issues of cosmology, what are the real issues? I just mentioned them to you: the horizon, water, gravity, and the gospel. These are the big four, folks. If you learn to focus on these four, then you'll realize that it's very easy to refute heliocentrism, and you'll be able to navigate out of these, conversations like, again, flight paths. Flight paths, we have a whole thing. I'm going to be talking about flight paths when we talk about the circle map. But flight paths are an easy way for you to get snared. You can debate flight paths all day, and you're not going to come to a clear conclusion. However, the horizon, water being level, the behavior of water, gravity, and the gospel all together refute heliocentrism easily. I've created 2 animated videos, one on how there's theological problems if you accept heliocentrism, i.e. why Christianity is incompatible with heliocentrism. Watch it. The other one is 20 reasons why gravity is a fraud. Watch that. Those 2 take care of those 2 reasons. Today we're going to look at horizon and the water, because the behavior of these 2 things in our reality proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that we don't live on a ball. So I'm going to take a real quick break, and we'll come back and we'll do the horizon. And we're back. So horizon is one of the key arguments that you need to maintain with anybody who believes in a heliocentric model. And today we're going to give you ample evidence. Again, not every possible thing, but you can look into it your own. I've collected some very damaging evidence, the top piece of evidence that I could think of, to show you that we do not live on a ball, folks. We really don't. The horizon rises to meet your eye level, which is impossible on any ball of any size, because the horizon would drop because it's curved eventually. It has to curve, so it would drop as you would raise from the ground. But yet, when you are at ground level and you go, let's say, in an airplane, the horizon rises to meet your eye level, which is only possible if the Earth was an extended plane ahead of you. That's the only way it could be possible. Of course, there's no video or photographic proof of curvature anywhere. We're going to look at that. Of course, the video and proof that you, quote-unquote, proof that you have from space, quote-unquote space, is very doctored and affected by NASA, because you'll see some proof that's very controversial or contradicting what NASA puts forward from space. Of course, I don't believe in space. I don't think there is space. We'll talk about that in just a second. But all the evidence that we have is contrary. It's contrary to what they tell you. It really is. And I'll prove it to you. So this is the longest bridge in the world, I believe. It's 160 kilometers long. This is the Danyang-Kushan Grand Bridge. And it is 102 miles long. It's in China somewhere. I think it's in the China Sea or somewhere. List of longest bridges you can look at as well. But this is the longest bridge. 100 miles, folks. Now you have to realize that if the Earth is a ball, they have to account for curvature as they're building this thing. And there's no single bridge in the United States, in the whole world, where they have ever accounted for the curvature of the Earth. Engineering doesn't do that. Why? Because Earth is a plane. Otherwise, you would have to create various structures to basically keep the bridge intact and from not buckling, and basically have a certain amount of curve over a certain distance. It's nonsense. It's nonsense because the Earth is straight. Anyway, that's that. You can look into that yourself. This is the longest photograph, 443 kilometers. Fenestrays, Pyrenees, and Pic Gaspard in the Alps. So you can see this is basically a vantage of about 440 kilometers. Longest line of sight photograph. And it shows you the peaks here. Now, if you do this in an average curvature calculator, just type in curvature calculator online and go into like all, 5 of the 6 top results that you get. See what they all say. On average, you are going to get that at a distance of 440 kilometers. That's a long distance. That is incredibly long. That you should not be able to see these mountains. It's impossible. Because at a distance of 443 kilometers, the average drop, according to curvature calculators, is about 5,000 meters, which is greater than the height of these mountains. And yet you can clearly see these mountains. Of course, a lot of people are going to, I've seen people break this photo down and say, well, no, it's actually refraction and this and that and math models and CGI and they're rebuilding the peaks and then they're creating it in a CGI model. Like, look, people, just use common sense, folks. And you're going to see even more examples that show you that this is impossible for this to be on a curve. You're not seeing this because the Earth is curving. You're seeing just the tips of the mountains. No, you're seeing this because the Earth is a plane. And you shouldn't be able to see something so far away based on the curvature that they tell you. This is a 600-mile observation. Let's listen to it because this is also very interesting. Now that people are getting so much technology with all their different cameras, things are they're getting very world record, 616 miles observation.
Record. But that world record pales in comparison to what Shimshon filmed. And this wasn't filmed from the top of a mountain, but only from about 133 feet. The observation comes from the Ashkelon National Park in Israel. According to Google Maps, the elevation at that location was 128 feet. Add 5 feet for the camera's tripod, and that gives us an observation height of about 133 feet. I have the coordinates listed here on the map. This was his camera and setup on that day. I don't know much about cameras, but Shimshon is using a full-spectrum infrared camera here. According to Shimshon, this is better than the Nikon P1000 for long-distance viewing, and it cost him less than $600. I hope at least 100 of you go out and get this setup. I certainly need one of these. Here's his equipment list for those who are interested. Pause the video if you need to. Much like this Canigou photograph that was taken in France from a distance of 163 miles that you can find on the Beyond Horizons website, Shimshon instead planned to capture the setting sun behind the Greek island of Crete. But the distance between Ashkelon National Park in Israel and the highest point in Crete was 616 miles.
616 miles.
That's 453 miles further than that Canigou photograph. And the only way you're going to see that far is through a full-spectrum infrared camera. Let's watch the footage. I'll leave a link to the unedited version in the description. There is some confusion on exactly what platform that is. Unlike many other countries, Israel seems to keep those things a little bit more hidden. And so you have some maps showing platforms much more north, while some showing the platforms much further south. The GPS coordinates are off as well. Shimshon didn't even know that the platform was going to be there when he planned this event. Although interesting, the platform and location doesn't affect the observation because we're relying on where the setting sun is and the angle to it. As you can see from this rough diagram, SunCalc placed the sun in direct line with Crete, but it gets better. So, how can we confidently say that Shimshon actually filmed Crete 616 miles away, and those aren't some distant clouds? First, keep in mind that the whole event was carefully planned and executed, including a specific date and vantage point. This wasn't an accidental viewing. He used a high-zoom, full-spectrum camera to capture what very few people would be able to do, to capture the silhouette of Crete in front of the setting sun. Second, the silhouette in front of the sun certainly looks like pointing mountains in the distance, much like Kenegu, which further supports Shimshon's claim. What are the odds that at the exact time of his planned observation, clouds just happen to form at the same angle with the setting sun that appear to look exactly like mountains? Possible, but not probable. But more importantly, the silhouette of the mountains in the actual video closely matches the same results from Google Earth. Here we have our pathway from the camera's location to the highest point of Crete. According to Google Earth on May 14th, 2023, this is what the sunset should have looked like on the same pathway. Keep in mind that Google Earth adds a phony curvature drop, which distorts the view of the mountains. Regardless...
That's another thing that's really important. You understand that they always use a math model. They always use formulas and CGI. It's a spell, folks. You need to break the spell, and you need to do it with your own eyes.
Compare Google Earth sunset with the actual video. I have them here on top of each other.
See? 3 little ridges.
The silhouette of the mountains in Shimshon's video appears very similar to what Crete should have looked like from that angle. And the sunset angles match as well. Those two facts strongly support the claim that Shimshon did indeed film Crete. Let's get to the coup de grace of the globe. At an observation height of 133 feet and a distance of 616 miles, we get a target hidden height of 240,197 feet, or
i.e.
45.5 miles. Here are the calculations in metric.
You can look up yourself these Earth curvature calculators, and all of them are wonky, man. Some of them use different formulas, but at the end of the day, like it's nonsense. 616 miles, and you can see a mountain range. Of course, now with all these really fancy cameras, all this stuff is starting to fall apart. All their lies is really becoming undone because people are actually doing investigation. Here's another interesting one with LoRa. If you don't know what LoRa is, it's a new type of technology a couple years ago that is a type of transmission technology. We're going to read about it. This is from 2017. With the rise of novel wireless technologies, we surprise ourselves over and over again of what these technologies are capable of. LoRa has been around now for more than 2 years, and people all over the planet are excited about its immense distance it can bridge while consuming extremely little energy. So they did a LoRa test. It's a type of signal, but as you'll learn, LoRa actually refutes the globe. The sounding balloon was filled with helium, and a lightweight node connecting to the thing's network was attached. Apart from the LoRa radio, antenna, GPS model of pressure, temperature, luminosity, infrared thermophile, light sensor were attached. It took the balloon almost 3 hours to ascend to an altitude of 38 kilometers. At this height, a single packet sent from the node was received by 148 gateways connected to the thing's network. One of the gateways reached during the flight, I'm guessing, is located in Proklau, Poland. By then, the balloon was flying over Osterwald in Germany, just across the German border from the Netherlands. A distance of 702 kilometers was reached by using only 25 milliwatt of transmitting power, roughly 40 times smaller than a mobile phone can use. So now, this doesn't immediately, like, okay, so what's the big deal? You'll understand why this is significant. This is the original record that was set with LoRa. Later, couple of years later, you had a new record set. New LoRa distance record, 830 miles. And this is set not in a balloon, hovering 38 kilometers above the Earth, but rather a boat on the sea. The LoRa radio communication system is used for a low bandwidth communication. As many readers will be aware, its special skill lies in its delivering long range. For most of us, that range tops out at a few miles, but pushing the limits of what is possible for LoRa has resulted in some significant records falling. I wonder why. Most recently, this has reached an impressive distance of 1336 kilometers or 830 miles. Here's where it is. It's around like the Atlantic Ocean, west coast of Spain and Africa. The record in question was set from near Portuguese coast, from where LoRa beacons on a fishing boat and its buoys were able to open up a gateway on the Spanish Canary Islands. The conductive surface of the sea makes an excellent aid to propagation. Of course, they give you their heliocentric explanation. And from amateur radio experience, we'd guess that the tropospheric conditions aided by the summer weather would have something to do with it too. Now, again, this may not seem to you like, okay, what's the big deal? Okay, I guess that seems right. That the atmospheric conditions and the conductive surface of the waves propagated this thing for 800 miles around the curve of the Earth. Yeah. That's nonsense, because if you actually look at what LoRa is, this is from 2018, 11 myths about LoRa. This is from a electronic design website. It tells you a couple of interesting things about LoRa. In a typical, number 2, LoRa signals can't really transmit over 10 kilometers. That's nuts. The answer to this: in a typical LoRaWAN network, range depends on numerous factors: indoor, outdoor gateways, payload of the message, antenna used, etc. On average, in an urban environment with an outdoor gateway, you can expect up to 2 to 3 kilometers wide coverage, while in the rural areas, it can reach beyond 5 to 7 kilometers. In some cases, extremely long range is also attainable, 702 kilometers. So this article was written a year after that original record. LoRa's range depends on, here you go, what does it say? Radio line of sight. Why is that important, folks? Radio waves at the 400 to 900 megahertz range may pass through some obstructions, depending on their composition, but will be absorbed or reflected otherwise. This means that the signal can potentially reach as far as the horizon. But if you're on a plane, where's the horizon? It just keeps going, folks. As long as there are no physical barriers to block it. Elevating LoRa devices, placing them on a rooftop or mountains, for example, will maximize their range. Other factors, such as the antenna gain, will also have large impact on the range. So, what's the point? LoRa is radio line of sight. According to engineers and experts, that line of sight can potentially reach as far as the horizon. But wait a minute. On a ball, the horizon isn't that far, folks, because the curvature is constantly curving. So when you have a LoRa test that spans 800 miles, what does that tell you? Oh, well, it's the conductivity of the water and the surface of this, and the waves just did this perfect timing with the atmospheric conditions, and that's how it came around the curvature of the Earth, which of course is nonsense. Let's see. This is from BitChute. Why do objects disappear from the bottom up? Let's look at some more interesting things about the horizon.
Make an object disappear
So here's a table with a quarter, and this guy's going to
bottom up without the need of curvature, or without the need of a physical obstruction for that matter. Now you Globers are going to sit at home.
See, it disappeared.
And say that table is just higher than the observer height or the camera height. Now let's get that sorted quick smart. When we zoom in, we increase the focal length and increase the angular resolution. And we can resolve that coin in its entirety. As you can see, the bottom of the coin shining.
Brought it back into zoom.
And when you zoom back out, the coin is unresolvable again. Nice flat table, no physical obstruction. This is all optical. There's absolutely no obstruction here. This is due to angular resolution. The angle from the observer to the coin was far too small to resolve the coin. Now when I lay it down, we can still see the coin flat on the table. No problem. And you can still see some table underneath the coin. But when you zoom out, the angular resolution is way too small to resolve that coin. Nothing to do with physical obstruction, and the table definitely isn't curving.
See, you can see it.
100% of the light of that coin is still reaching the observer. The only thing that is creating this optical illusion of something disappearing bottom up is the angle to which you are viewing the object. As you can see, the entire coin is resolved. And when you zoom out, decreasing the focal length, it's unresolved. Now, if this was a ship out in the water all you globers would assert that it is Earth curve creating this bottom-up disappearance. But as I've just shown, angular resolution
See? Just comes
is
back.
a thing.
It's all optics, man. It's not curvature. And this is on a table. It's not on water,
Now,
so
what
you can
is
say.
angular resolution? Well, it all has to do with
There you
the
go.
way that we view light, whether it be from your eyeball, a camera, or a telescope. In optics, the best focused spot of light that a perfect lens with a circular aperture can make is called the airy disk. Now, as you can see in this left-hand side, there are 2 points of light and 2 Aries disks. They are both resolved. Now, when they get closer together, this meets the Rayleigh criterion, or the diffraction limit. And so the Rayleigh criterion specifies the minimum separation between 2 light sources that may be resolved into each distinct object. And when the light sources get even closer on the right-hand side, they become unresolvable.
So what he's going to explain in a second, you don't get caught up in all the crazy terms. What it just means is that the light is still hitting your eyes, folks. The problem is, as in this example moves farther away, the light is interfering with one another, and basically that's what causes the effect of not seeing it. That's why you can bring it back into focus if you have zoom, and why people you'll see with cameras are doing just that with advanced cameras, proving that the Earth is not a ball.
In this to my observation, when the coin is closer to the camera, it is fully resolved. As you start moving the coin away from the camera, it meets the Rayleigh criterion, or the diffraction limit. And this creates a smaller angle, making the coin disappear bottom up. And when you move the coin further away, it becomes fully unresolved.
Because the light from the coin
now,
and
as
the
I
table
said,
are hitting
100%
you.
of the light from that coin is still reaching the camera. It's just unresolved. But when you zoom back in, you increase the focal length and you increase the angle at what you are viewing that object.
Stupid play symbol. The angle here, the focal length, the angle is very small. When you increase the focal length, it gets bigger, and so you're separating these 2 waves again. You don't have to be like a science nerd to realize this. You're basically distinguishing them again. That's why you can bring things back into zoom.
Now, when you zoom in enough, it will meet the Rayleigh criterion, where you can see the 2 distinct objects again, the coin and the table. And when you get past that diffraction limit, you can fully resolve the object.
See? Now they're separate again. Now you can see the coin and the table.
Has all to do with the angle that you are viewing an object. Now that we know about angular resolution and the diffraction limit, let's add some distance. This pole is about 3 foot off the water, and I'm going to put my camera on top of it. This is a common observation by most people with a zoom camera of seeing a boat disappearing bottom up. But as you can see,
boom, there it is.
It's definitely not going to be due to Earth curvature, as the horizon is still far in the distance.
You see that? This is one thing that, because people say, oh, it's curvature and it's creating a hologram through refraction. It's just mind games. Look at the horizon here. The horizon is actually beyond the boat. So the boat isn't past the horizon. Do you get the point? That's the fascinating thing. But it's all optics.
This is a good example of angular size.
Yeah.
When you zoom out, it reduces the focal length, and the angular size gets so small that it reaches the diffraction limit.
Angular size refers to, it's a measurement of the size of something in your field of vision. And we have, I forget what the minimum, 0.3 angular size or something. This is, by the way, we might talk about this in the near future with one of these episodes, which is the angular size of the things that you see in the sky should not be the case given the sizes that they tell you they are. Like Jupiter is, 800,000 miles in diameter or whatever. and it's 8 quadrillion miles away. Based on those things, you can go to an angular size calculator, and you could do this, have some fun. Again, I'm not going to do every single thing under the sun for proofs, but this is another proof that you can look into, is angular size. Look in Google, get the diameters of the planets, supposedly, and the distances, put them in an angular size calculator, and you're going to see that according to their own math, we should not be able to see the planets in the sky. Yet you can see them. You can see Jupiter, you can see Mars, you can see all these different things. Angular size is the size in your visual field. And we have a minimum that we can see. We're not, we don't have P9000s or P1000s for our eyes. We can see pretty good, but we have a minimum that's, again, it's like 0.3 or something. I forget what the minimum, you can look it up, minimum angular size for the eye, or resolving power of the eye. And there's 2 units, I forget what it are. But if you convert that to angular size, you will see that the planets should not be seen. Another good example, like Tau Ceti. Tau Ceti is a star, and supposedly it's 11 light years away, which is, I don't know how many trillions of miles, but it's half the luminosity of the sun, meaning it's half the brightness. And it's, I forget the size, it's like 3/4 of the sun or half of the size of the sun. It's smaller than the sun and half the brightness, and, however many exponentially times farther away. And yet you could see it in the night sky. That doesn't make any sense by any stretch of the imagination. So again, you can use your own math to refute them, but you have to be...
When you zoom back in, increasing the focal length, the angular size increases, and you can resolve it again.
Because you have more light. You have more light hitting your
see,
lens.
Angular resolution of the image has also changed.
See, the farther you go,
the horizon is still far in the background.
There's less light, and so the angular size gets smaller.
Now, comparing these 2 images, on the left,
1 inch
the observer
coverage.
height is 1 inch, and on the right, the observer height is 3 foot. And you can see clearly that the boat has started to disappear bottom up. There is no Earth curve, as you can see the horizon in the background, but both boats are starting to disappear bottom up.
Just depends on your height.
Let's add some more distance. This is Bathurst Lighthouse from 20 kilometres away. The left image is from a 30 metre viewing height, and the right image from a 2 metre viewing height. The obstruction...
You see the difference between the viewer height? So the rules of perspective are still in effect. The question is, how high is your observation perspective? Keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to that very exact point. The height of the observer, which a lot of these
in the right image, the globe
curvature memes will exploit,
is only from Earth curvature and nothing else. But I've shown you in this video the angular resolution can cause obstruction from bottom up without the need of any Earth curvature. Now,
so you see that this is a rock right here. Kind of maybe hard to tell on the screen, but this is a rock. This is a lighthouse on a mountainous kind of rocky area. It's from a 30 viewing height. So you're 30 meters off of sea level. Whereas this is the same lighthouse, but at a 2 meter viewing height. So your angular resolution is very different because of your height. And so what's the point? The point is that the time, based on your height, the time that those 2 waveforms blend into one and it's occluded in your eye is going to be much faster. Does that make sense? It's all perspective and optics. It's not curvature. And of course, they're going to exploit that.
Now, if we continue to
and
zoom
try to lie to
in
you,
on that right image, we will never be able to resolve the bottom of it. And globers will say, well, that's clearly because it's a physical obstruction from a reified edge of a globe. But in the next 2 videos that I'm going to release...
So anyway, you get the point. People say, oh, it's because of the curve, that's why you can't resolve the bottom of it. No, it's because of your height. Height determines how much resolving power, and of course distance else. It's all optics and perspective. Let's see, here's another one. Oh, this is a good animation to give you the point about the LoRa test. Remember the LoRa test is the line of sight? And it goes, oh, it can go potentially as far as the horizon. Well, it seems like it went 800 miles. Is that as far as the horizon goes? Are we on a ball then, if that's the case? Well,
demands that its surface immediately begins to curve downward and away from any point on it. So if we imagine, let's call him PJ for short, if we imagine him standing on the beach ball, immediately the ball is curving downward and away from his feet in all directions. That's what a ball does. And it doesn't matter how big the person is, nor does it matter how big the ball is. But let's go ahead and shrink PJ and enlarge the ball for the sake of example here. Now, notice the lines are still curving downward and away in all directions, even though he's getting smaller and the ball is getting bigger. This never changes with scale. Okay, now let's zoom into tiny PJ on the massive ball here. PJ's clone walks 1 mile away. The top of his head would be 8 inches lower than PJ's. Another clone walks an additional mile, and the top of his head is then 32 inches below PJ's. The third clone
We'll talk about this 8 inches per mile squared really quick after this.
walks 1 more mile, and at just 3 miles away from PJ, the ground clone number 3 is standing on is 6 feet below PJ's. Clone number 3's head is going to be even with the bottom of PJ's feet. Now, I'm not trying to see whether or not the person can see the other person. The ground level is the issue that I'm focused on with this example. Because if clone number 3's ground is 72 inches below the ground that PJ's standing on, it's going to be physically impossible for PJ to look straight ahead or to the left or the right or behind him and expect to see the horizon at his eye level. The blue circle at the top of the beach ball here, that's the visible horizon. So from whatever point you're standing on, in 360 degrees, that line is going to be the same. But that only works if you're looking down. I don't care how big the ball is. I don't care how small you are compared to the ball. If you're standing on the ball, from that point outward is receding downward at an exponential rate, which means you can never look out to this mystical circle out in front of you at eye level. It can't happen.
Do you understand what he's saying? If you're on a ball of no matter what size with any amount of curvature, from under your feet, there's a curve. Doesn't matter how much the Earth is curving, it's curving. That means there is no horizon where you could be on a tangent point, basically, looking straight and see the horizon extending forever, especially when you're rising above the Earth and seeing it rise to your eye level. It's impossible. It is impossible on no matter how, the Earth could be the size of the sun in the heliocentric model. You would still see and experience the same effect with the horizon. It wouldn't happen.
While in principle it sounds good, looks good, it does not exist in the observable, testable, and repeatable example of reality. According to Pythagorean math, the 25,000-mile circumference ball Eratosthenes invented does not allow for us to ever be able to see the supposed edge of a horizon that presents itself at eye level. Yet whether we're on the ground or flying up to 37,000 feet in an airplane or sending up a weather balloon to over 100,000 feet,
see?
There's that totally flat horizon straight ahead at our eye level. Always. That's simply not possible if it's receding downward and away from us at a rate of 8 inches per mile squared, which is what it must do.
Yeah, so it's impossible. Now, really quick, I want to make a mention. I should probably whip out the paint here. Let's see if I can, because this will be discussed really quick, because people will say, well, no, the 8 inches per mile squared is not it's not the actual curvature formulation of the Earth. So where do they get this idea that the curvature of the Earth drops away by 8 inches per mile squared? Meaning every mile, there's a certain amount of inches that are dropped, 8 inches per mile squared. Is that the formula for the curvature of the Earth? Well, yes and no, it's not. So you have to be prepared when people challenge you with this, because it'll seem like, oh my gosh, maybe I've been wrong about this whole curvature thing. It's an approximation. However, that approximation is valid, and I'll show you why. If I can draw here, where's my tools? Okay, let's see. Can I draw? Okay, I can draw. Yay. So you have a graph. Let's say you have a graph here. Does that look? Okay, good. And you have something called a parabola, right? You have a parabola in mathematics, parabolic equations. Parabolas look like this. If I can hold my hand steady. That's a parabolic equation, okay? It goes up, it's like a wave. It comes back and comes back down. That's just a type of equation. The 8 inches per mile squared thing comes from this parabolic equation because there's a curve here. Of course, there's different kinds of parabolas, like there's ones that are very acute and so on. So this particular one has a particular curve. Now people say, see, that's a parabolic equation. It's not the actual curvature of the Earth. Your calculations are wrong. Well, no, not really, because there is the equation of a circle, and that equation, oh boy, it's really hard to draw this freehand with a mouse. There we go. That's my best that I can do, so just deal with it. Okay, this is the equation of a circle, okay? Why is this significant? Because the curve of the parabola, even though it doesn't look on this crummy drawing I drew here, but the curve of the parabola, the parabolic curve, intersects and overlaps with the curve of the circle for a very significant amount of distance. After a certain point, they are no longer related. You see these 2 points here where the parabola deviates and does its own thing and the circle comes back around? Yes, at this particular, so if you're measuring, for example, from here all the way to here, like half of the circle, then yeah, at some point this is not going to be relevant anymore. But that is besides the point. Most of the calculations that you're doing fall within the period or the intersection of these two equations. The equation for curvature is a little more complicated, curvature of the Earth. So that's why you have curvature calculators. But even so, like I said, you can use those, you can use their own math against them and it refutes them immediately. Because curvature calculators prove that all these photos and things could not possibly happen, like the LoRa test or the observation of 600 whatever miles and so on. Anyway, the point is that this 8 inches per mile squared is an approximation based on parabolic equation, but that parabolic equation is still valid for, I forget the threshold distance, but it's like, 1,500 miles or something like that. So if you're trying to measure curvature up until distance of 1,500 miles, 8 inches per mile squared is a decent enough approximation to reveal to you a number of what it would actually be. Meaning that the numbers that we do get, like that 612 mile capture from Israel to, was it Crete, I think? Where the mountains had to be like under 240,000 feet of curvature or something ridiculous. That's an accurate approximation. Whether it's 220 or 200,000, it doesn't really matter. The problem is that at that distance, you should not be able to see these structures. You shouldn't. And of course, there's many such proofs like this. So anyway, if anybody says that's not the curvature calculation, now you know the answer. Here is another, what's this from? Let's see. Oh, this is the one that we were just watching. Okay, this is what I was telling you. Oh, not yet. We're not yet to decimal C. This is DogCam. This is DogCam Sport. And they flew this is famous amateur footage, 100-something thousand feet above. So they flew this. I'll have to. Okay. Here it is. This is a giant weather balloon that they put a camera on, and this is amateur footage, and you'll see. Look, straight as a board. The problem is this camera is moving, obviously, because the air is moving it around. But look, it's completely straight. This is 110,000 feet in the air. Now, compare NASA footage and NASA claims and all of this nonsense, and what do you get? You get that somebody's lying. Well, this isn't lying. This is an amateur footage, and of course, a lot of people have used it. See, local sun. As to the position, who knows? We're going to speculate on that. But local sun, folks, an infinite giant plane. Tells you the altitude, tells you the temperature, and so on. Amazing. Truly amazing. The world we live in, this giant, perfectly choreographed clock, living clock. It's amazing. Truly amazing. It reveals the brilliance of God. but you can look into that yourself. This is the greatest laser experiment in history by Decimal Z. That's the channel I was telling you that has some great experiments. But let's look at the first 30 seconds. You can watch this video on your own. I highly recommend it. It's an hour long. They did a laser experiment over a particular lake in Europe somewhere, I think. But it was like 40 kilometers. This is a laser, so it goes completely straight. Lasers do not curve over the curvature of the Earth. They controlled the atmospheric conditions. They controlled the high eye level and so on over a flat surface of a lake because the water is level. Over 40-something kilometers, no curvature. No difference between the level of the laser beginning, the source, and the laser ending. If there's curvature of any kind, then the source, when it's with whatever height the source is at, by the end, it should not be hitting the same height from sea level. You understand? It doesn't curve around the curvature of the Earth. It goes straight. Lasers go straight. And we should expect to see a height difference, but there was none. Let's see.
Have you ever wondered how big the Earth really is?
Oh, there's ads.
In this video,
No, there's no ads.
FE Core will
Thank
guide
goodness.
you through a thought process to show how a simple idea of a measurement developed into a discovery that shakes the foundation of our current scientific understanding based on the WGS-84 map system, which is the accepted model for Earth's shape and surface. You may want to brace yourself. The curvature. Earth is said to be a sphere with a circumference of 25,000 miles or 40,000 kilometers. Therefore, it has to have a curvature of about 8 inches per mile squared.
Now remember, that's an approximation. I just wanted to show you this video. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but they do a great test. I highly recommend watching this video. He's got some other videos we'll be looking at in the future with Eratosthenes, where he reproduced the experiment and basically shows the Eratosthenes model of a ball is actually just taking a flat surface with a local light source and inverting the information because you're ignoring refraction. It's very fascinating. But it sounds maybe complicated, it sounds really scientific, but it's really not. It's very simple. These things are very simple. The curvature of the Earth has a certain rate. We should expect to see things drop off the horizon and not be visible at all. You shouldn't be able to pull things back in to view, or you shouldn't be able to see certain things like those mountains. And of course you can, because the Earth is not a ball. So I highly recommend those videos. Here's another great test experiment. It's called the geodesic measurement. And these are geodesic tests in Brazil. Now, geodesic means to measure the distance between 2 points. And in this particular case, you'll see it's basically done with buildings. And the height of the building, you'll see what I mean. I think they'll have a graphic here. Let's see. Curvature test performed in Brazil in 2011 by a group of both independent researchers and civil engineers, members of the Brazilian government agency INCRA, National Institute of the Agrarian Reform. So this is it's a serious thing. It's not just...
An unprecedented experiment developed by the researchers was to measure the geodesic curvature between two buildings over a long distance using high-precision GPS.
Considering the round planet, you have to mark a point from one extreme to the other, from a certain distance, precisely to prove mathematically whether the Earth is round or not. So we got two cities, far away. We take two buildings, one in a city in the south and one in a city in the north. This one in the south and this one in the north. What happens if we measure this distance here at the base of the buildings? If the Earth is...
Do you see what they're doing? Do you see this? Maybe if I can draw it. Where's my paint? There's my paint. To make it maybe a little more obvious. So what they're doing... This is a very, very interesting experiment. I'm sad they only have like a couple hundred views on their video, but watch. Here's the curve of the Earth. Okay? Assume that's the Earth. Here's building 1. Right? You know, however many, 50 miles away or whatever it is. 100 miles away. I forget the distances, but they were pretty significant. Here's building 2. There's a curvature of the earth. Now, at the bottom of these buildings, ground level for these buildings, there is a distance between them, right? There's a straight line between them. Because you're on a curve, there's a straight line. At the top of the buildings, right, there should be a longer distance. Why? Because of the curvature of the earth, the buildings are going outward from each other. Does that make sense? If the earth was curved, the buildings would be going outward from each other. So what we'd expect to see with all that GPS and fancy laser technology is that this distance, we'll call this A. Oh gosh, I write like a preschooler with this mouse. And let's say B, A should be greater than B. If you're on a flat plane and you have two buildings, what do you think the answer is? Well, A is equal to B. So that alone is a very simple measurement. If the earth is curved, then we should expect to see a difference between these two measurements. And you'll see that they did not find a difference.
Really spherical. When we measure buildings of the same height, when measuring the top, there has to be a difference. Because if the Earth is spherical, it must have a superior length than the base.
To carry out the experiment of the geodesic curvature, two buildings were chosen of the same height and sea level, as far apart from each other as possible. High-precision GPS measurements are done at the base and at the top of each building. According to the theory of the spherical Earth, the distance of the measurements of the bases must be different than the measurements of the top, even in a few meters. But if the measurements are equal, this would show that the Earth has no curvature. In order for the results to come out with the best possible precision, the CTZ researchers invited INCRA, the National Institute of Colonization and Agrarian Reform. This is one of the most respected organizations in Brazil and one of the best in the world in the area of topography.
So not just some guys in their basement, but an official government-involved operation.
INCRA engineers and technicians met with the researchers from the CTZ and Daquila to decide on the realization of the experiment, which would be evident.
Anyway, you can watch this video. It's a great video. It's only, like 8 minutes long. We won't watch the whole thing, but I wanted to show it to you that there's actually science being done, folks. But you don't hear about this science, do you? And this will be when we talk about the heliocentric conspiracy. There's actually been so much science done to prove what the Bible tells you about cosmology, and yet you never hear about it, and it's suppressed, or it's spun in a different direction. Oh no, that's not what's happening. That something else is happening. Oh no, it's just this, or it's atmospheric this, or it's just refraction, or it's this, that. It's always gaslighting. And unless you are sure of these things, then it's easy to get deceived. Here's another one. This is the Uyuni Salt Flats. Very interesting place to look at. Very beautiful too. And it's in, where is it, Chile or something? Bolivia. It's in Bolivia, and it's, I think, a distance of like 75 miles. It's just a giant flat plain. And you can see, here we go. Look at this nice, beautiful picture. Completely flat. You can see these, mountains, 75 miles of just flat surface that you can see openly. Look at this straight line. By the way, you never see the horizon curving left to right like this now, do you? If it's a ball, it should be, again, if you're looking straight, you shouldn't be able to see the horizon. You shouldn't, because any ball, no matter how size, is curving under your feet. But that's something to consider, is the Uyuni Salt Flats. This is a picture from, I believe, the Burj Khalifa in, Dubai? Yeah, that's in Dubai. And it's on the 148th story of the Burj Khalifa. Somebody took this, and you can see nice straight line. Of course, the camera is a little bit of an angle, but it's a straight line, folks. The horizon is straight as far back as you can see it, because it extends and extends and extends. This is a famous picture by, who's it by? I forget. Frank? Well, I think we'll find the author in just a second, but where does it say? It doesn't say. Joshua Nowicki, maybe? I don't know. Where's this thing at? Here we go. Look at this. Oh, and it's just all zoomed out because of this stupid view. Look, Chicago, Illinois from skyline. Look at this. Straight as a board. Now look at this completely straight line and tell me how is this possible on a ball. Chicago, Illinois is completely flat. And you can see out into the infinite distance. It's profound. Okay, here's another one. This is from Chicago by Joshua Nowicki. I think it's the same person who took that. I forgot. I could be wrong. But this is a famous photograph looking towards Chicago, Illinois from St. Joseph, April 9th, 2024. Chicago, 59 miles away. People have photographed Chicago 59 miles away from the other side of the lake, and you can see it. You shouldn't be able to see the buildings, folks. You can see these little buildings. You can see the skyline, which again has to do with angular size, the angle of refraction, and so on and so forth. The light from these things is still hitting your eyes, but so is all the light from the ocean. The farther you get, all those things just kind of blur into one horizon line. Whereas the more you can resolve them back in, you distinguish them. They're there. You can just distinguish them and you can see them. That's why with a high-powered lens, you can do these types of things. Okay. Oh, here we go. This is now we're going to look at some of these, anti-flat Earth, the flat Earth, debunking flat Earth misconceptions. Flat Earth Dark WS. They have a ton of propaganda, which I would love to expose so that you see just the tactics of the enemy and how much nonsense and gaslighting they talk about. This is Perspective in the Lake Pontchartrain transmission line, which is a famous line of transmission towers. And they're saying, look, this proves the curvature of the Earth. It's a viral photo that's been going around the internet, but let's read about it. The Lake Pontchartrain power transmission pylons demonstrate Earth's curvature. Flat earthers invented various excuses to dismiss the observation, including the excuse that it was just a perspective effect. If it were just a perspective effect, the same parts of the pylons would line up in a straight line, converging into a distant point. In reality, they do not line up in a straight line, but are visibly curving downward due to the curvature of the Earth. They say, you see, this is what they're actually doing. Check mark, good. X, bad. No, they don't do this, which actually they do this, and you'll see it for yourself, but this is an optical illusion, and they're just propagandizing it. References, they have all these references. Let's see. This is the picture, the famous viral photo. Of course, if you look at it, it seems like these things are curving behind the horizon. That's kind of a strange look, isn't it? Well, it's a strange look for two reasons, for the atmospheric conditions and for the fact that the power lines are actually on an angle. They're on a curve. You'll see what I mean. Meaning they're not on the curve around the Earth, but on a curve. They're not on a straight line. They're also going this way. And I'll show it to you on Google Maps. But this is the photo. And of course, people say, look, curvature of the Earth. But if you actually draw lines on this particular photo and you draw them like this, look at the amount of curvature that suddenly happens. So think logically now. Let's look at another picture. This is a right angle that's drawn. Look at the angle of the lines. That's straight as a board can be. And then suddenly it just curves downward by like 90 degrees. That doesn't happen. If the Earth was a ball, these lines should be curved. Do you understand? You shouldn't have perspective lines, by the way, on a curved Earth. If the Earth was curved, which we're going to be looking at perspective as another issue that they like to gaslight you with. Perspective proves that the Earth is flat because these lines are straight. It doesn't go straight. Oh, sudden drop by 90 degrees. Doesn't happen. So this is a lie. Of course, what's the reason for it? Well, the reason is several-fold. Okay, this is Google. Okay, there we go. I did make the distance. Okay, so these are the power lines. This is Lake Pontchartrain. It's in Louisiana. If you go on Google Earth and you look for it really carefully, they're kind of in there. But if you... Leave me alone. Oh, no, I erased it. Oh, anyway. Okay, boy, was that an adventure. I lost these little power... Because they're not marked anywhere. You have to zoom in and find them. And of course, it's almost impossible to find them in this murky water. But here they are again. I'm not going to click on this little warning at the bottom because that's what it took the thing away. But if you go to Lake Pontchartrain and you go towards the west, you can find these right where the river is here at the top of the lake. You can find the power lines. If we zoom in, you see them? See they are? There they are. There's the power lines. So there's where it starts. Okay, so about 16 miles down there. So it's 16 miles, by the way. You can see that 16-mile distance. And there's where it ends. Now, the problem with this is that this one is the final power line. But if you see this power line here, and this one, and this one, you see how far it is from the line between the final one and the first one? It's about half a mile distance. This is about, or actually no, it's not half a mile. It's about 0.10 of a mile. But it's a distance. It's on an angle. The point is that, look, here's the next one. Here's the next one. Oops. And pretend that doesn't exist. Here's the next one. Look at the two lines, how far apart they are. If you see this and you keep going, pretty soon these lines get closer and closer together. Why is that important? What matters is because these two lines actually come at the head at the top, but they diverge. So it's on an angle and it curves back around. So why is that important? Well, it adds to the optical effect that you're seeing with this supposed curvature effect. You see, if I just zoom out a little faster, see, they converge. They converge on the same. Here's the power line. Here's the actual line between the first and the last one. So it goes away and then it comes back. So that curvature laterally, right? It's on a curve, and in that sense, it's a diagonal. That adds to the effect, because as you'll see on different days when the atmospheric conditions are not the same as they were in that picture, that famous viral picture, you'll see what they told you you couldn't see, which is the straight lines going straight into perspective. So anyway, that's just to debunk that. But here's the video about that whole thing. Let's watch.
Let me just go out on a whim here and wildly guess that you've probably been shown this picture before and told that this displays the curvature of the Earth. This photo from Lake Pontchartrain, the power lines, does not demonstrate the curvature of the Earth as much as these little Legos.
See the Legos? People have done this exact experiment using Legos on a table because of the angular size and refraction, all the angular, whatever it's called, I forget the name now, but the optics that happen when you have things moving away from you. On a table, they've curved Legos or dominoes on a curved path, and it creates the same effect.
Legos demonstrate the curvature of this table.
It's not curved.
I know what you're thinking. How, dude? How does this not demonstrate the curvature of the Earth? So let's just make it really clear, just in case children are watching. Modern science says the human eye can see 3 miles into the distance from 6 feet off the ground. And due to the Earth's curvature, we can witness a boat disappear over the horizon at that distance. So they're saying this is physical obstruction, unlike what the flat earthers are saying, that this is an apparent horizon, an optical illusion. Us flat earthers, we're saying the opposite. We're saying this isn't physical obstruction. Look, you just zoom in and you can pull boats, mountains, buildings, all back into frame. So what I'm getting at here is that this doesn't happen every single day. And it should if it were the actual geometric horizon of the curvature of the Earth obstructing and showing these power lines going down, us not seeing the bottom of them. It should happen like this every single day. But this was just a random day with great atmospheric conditions to make a mirage, to make it look like it's the curvature of the Earth. Don't believe me?
I am dangerously on 55 and I-10 junction in New Orleans over Lake Pontchartrain. These are the utility poles that run 18 miles across the lake. And I just wanted to show you.
Pay attention. It's straight now. Just what they told you. It's not possible. Remember on that flat Earth debunking site? It's not possible to see them in straight lines. Check mark. Good. X. Look. Completely straight. Gosh, this stupid thing. Completely straight. See? Completely straight. Same place we're talking about, folks. The difference is there's no atmospheric conditions like an angle and so on as the other.
Things pretty clear. This is what we should expect from...
Anyway, so you get the point that it's all just smoke and mirrors, and these people know what they're doing. They're liars, and they don't care. They're just lying to you. Either that or they're very deceived, aren't scientific thinkers. So one of the two, but either way, it's not good. Here's another very, very famous meme from these people. True horizon and linear perspective. So this is another way that they gaslight you. In graphical linear perspective, the horizon is the horizontal line where the vanishing points for level objects lie. But as the Earth is a sphere, it is not the same as the true horizon, which is the line we observe separating the Earth from the sky. So they give you these various pictures, which we're going to break them down in just a second. They say, oh, look, see these lines, they actually intersect above the horizon. So that's the true horizon because, it's invisible because the Earth is actually going curvature beyond it. And it's like, at first, if you're not as wise as a serpent, you look at this like, wow, maybe you're right. Maybe the Earth is curving that way. And that's why all these perspective lines are, intersecting above the, what seems to be the horizon. I think I already did that. Flat earthers claim that the observed horizon is produced by the law of perspective. In reality, from a high vantage point, we can try extending level and parallel lines to find their vanishing points. In many cases, they will end up above the true horizon. So therefore, the Earth must be curved, right? Not so fast. In perspective drawing, the vanishing point is usually near the center of the horizon line, but not always. Very important point. Vanishing point is where all parallel lines intersect and is always on the horizon line. Using the example of a straight road clearly illustrates what this means. Imagine a street with a consistent width that stretches into the distance. If you look directly at the street from above, both sides form parallel lines. And of course, we all know this because we have experience in the physical world. When you look at something, it vanishes. It's a vanishing point. That's a very important point of our reality. Can the vanishing point be below the horizon line? Somebody asked a question. Vanishing points always lie on the horizon line with one exception, inclined planes. If a surface is inclined upwards relating to the viewer's position, the vanishing point of the incline will be above the horizon. If it's inclined downwards, a staircase going down, for example, or a road that goes downhill from the point where the image is viewed, its vanishing point will be below the horizon line. So important to understand what actual perspective laws and perspective drawings utilize, because these people are lying to you yet again. This is from Tombow. It's like a perspective type of drawing page. They're talking about art. Here's rays of light in the eye. We talked about this with that video, with basically what you get as a result of the distance of various objects and how they're resolved. The basic elements of perspective drawing. In order to understand human perception, there are three important tools for perspective drawing: the horizon line, vanishing points, and vanishing lines. Now, vanishing points may not always be on the horizon line, which is an important point. Although the Earth is round, it's not. The horizon line appears to us as a clear separation between the ground and the sky, which would be impossible if the Earth was round, you fools. Usually it is covered by trees, hills, or buildings, and we don't consciously notice it. Only looking at the ocean clearly shows us the horizon line. It also shows you the Earth is flat. The horizon line plays an important role in drawings. It demarcates the ground, which represents the foundation for us. If we want to convey three-dimensionality, we always need to use this foundation as a reference. Look at this beautiful picture. Water is level, but it's supposed to be curving this way. You just don't see it. The horizon line, actually, this is a good example of even look at this picture. So do you see how this particular wood, I didn't even notice this originally when I saw it, but this particular wooden bridge is built over a hill. It's like, it's a land feature where there's a curve. There's a curve of this hill. And do you see how the lines account for that curvature? So they bend. They bend over the curvature of this little hill or whatever it's on. But they're not straight because they start curving away. If you actually drew a straight line from here, they would land in the horizon. But it curves because this actual structure is curving. This is my point. When you have perspective lines, if the Earth was curving and there was a horizon that was dropping as to the rate of that curvature, you couldn't have perspective lines, okay? Everything would have to be curving to hit the vanishing point on the horizon. The fact that things all can be drawn into a singular point that is on the horizon, or even slightly above it, as you'll see why that happens, proves to you that you're dealing with a level plane. But anyway, moving on. The horizon line is always at the eye level of the viewer. That is an important point. However, viewers can have different heights, which means the height of the horizon line will shift. starting to see why maybe those memes might be wrong. That is why a distinction is made among 3 different perspectives: the bird's eye view, the normal perspective, and the worm's eye view. The vanishing point is where all parallel lines intersect and is always on the horizon line. Using the example of a straight road clearly illustrates what this means. I think this was what Google took, but you can see, here's an example of the horizon, very clearly so. The straight road, very classic example that we're all familiar with, goes right into the... So how come, the question is now, if we see this, why is this not going below the horizon point? Why is there, or, why isn't there a difference between the true horizon and the vanishing point here? What's going on? If the Earth is curved, then what they show you in those memes, which are very cleverly taken, by the way, what we see there should be everywhere. Do you get the point? That should be consistent. There shouldn't be exceptions to the rule. But of course, there are exceptions to the rule. Of course, these are different laws of perspective. So what's going on here? Well, let's see. Are level and horizon the same? This is from an art forum called Wet Canvas. Are eye level and horizon the same? They are the same. They aren't the same either in life or in paintings. You can put the horizon where you want in a painting. Some people like to put it high up, some in the middle, some low. Eye level is where the painting is hung. You can have a painting with a low horizon high and hung at eye level, etc., etc. So, what is the point? The vanishing points and the horizon can be 2 different things. That's a very important distinction, because they're telling you that the reason the vanishing points of those particular pictures, which again are very strategically taken, and the horizon being different, they're telling you that the reason for that is the curvature of the Earth curving backwards. And so you see, that proves the Earth is curved. It's just curving around. Of course, it doesn't curve this way, left to right. So that's also an interesting point that they refuse to make. But either way, they're telling you that the difference between the vanishing points intersection and the horizon being different in those particular images, the difference is because the Earth is curving. But that's not the reason. The difference is a different reason, because you see other places, like we just saw with the road and this bridge here. Here's a picture. Here's the vanishing point. Here's the horizon. The vanishing point is on the horizon. Is the Earth not curving here? Is this what's going on? Here's your perspective lines that are straight, which, by the way, couldn't be straight if the Earth was curving over such a long period, of such a long distance. But this is the point. So what's going on? How do we reconcile these exceptions? Well, here's a couple more examples. Why did this pop up? Did I do this? I think I did. Let me see. Yeah, here we go. And close this one. Vanishing point. Here's a particular drawing. These are all different drawings. And of course, vanishing point is something that's done. In this case, you can see, seems like the horizon line is a little bit higher. Vanishing point, here's a higher, basically, vanishing point, and so on and so forth. Different types of techniques. What you get is that the eye level determines the vanishing points of a particular, and the angle too. Like, for example, these shots, here's another example. This is 23-mile bridge. I forget where it's at, but anyway, this is a picture of a 23-mile bridge. You can see here's the bird's eye view. Here's eye level, basically, taking a picture of this. These are straight lines. This is straight. Okay, if the Earth was curving over 23 miles, which you should be able to see it at 8 inches per mile squared approximately, these could not be straight all the way to the end of the horizon. And you shouldn't be able to bring them back in view and maintain them straight. They should be curving around the curvature of the Earth, not suddenly going and then, oh, by the way, yeah, it just curves away from you. That's the way it happens. That's not the way it happens, folks. This is straight. These are parallel. They're parallel, and they go completely straight, and they vanish in a particular point because of the optics and things we talked about previously. But here's that picture again. And what's going on here? Well, what's going on is very, very clever and very simple. Look at the eye level. This is sea level. We'll use this one on the bottom right. And if you aren't sure what I'm talking about, just Google flat earth WS horizon perspective. You'll see the meme in question. They've taken only photos from very high up, far above, sea level. And with these buildings, see, like this building, for example, it's right next to this building like this. And this building is very high up. And of course, all the lines on this particular building are a little bit higher than the horizon level because this building is very high up. If you went to ground level like we did in those other pictures, your perspective would go to the horizon, would be even with the horizon. But you see, all of these pictures are taken from very high up. And so the perspective, the vanishing point, is different than the horizon because your perspective and your eye level are different. Do you understand? Vanishing points are not always on the horizon. That's an effect of optics based on your level, the level that you're standing at, and perceiving. Because again, we've looked at so many other examples where if you're at eye level, they vanish into the horizon. So this is just trickery, as usual. This is trickery, and it's nonsense. Here's another important video. Gosh, this was done by a guy exposing these NASA things. This is a great video.
Point Nemo. Just screwing around, I sent this to my friend, and I go, look, here, you want to see where the fake X rockets land?
Approximately 1,450 nautical
Middle of
miles
nowhere,
from
for
the
real.
nearest coast. If you reach here, you are closer to the International Space Station than the nearest land. Its isolation has made it an ideal location for a spacecraft cemetery, where decommissioned satellites and spacecraft find
Look, they're telling you what's there, so maybe it's true.
Surface.
Of course, he sends me a screenshot of this, and he's like, hey, basically, thanks for proving the globe, dude. So I show this photo to my better half, and I go, where is this? Can you look on the globe and see where that is? She goes, that's Italy. I go, oh, no way. She's like, that's Italy. Take a look. I'm like, holy mackerel, it is Italy. Okay, so let's cruise through the footage. Okay, this is what they normally show you from the ISS, just a bunch of clouds. But here they showed you some land. Like, where is that? It's Italy. There's one little island there. There's two little islands there. Obviously, Italy. So check it out. I took the photo, and I printed it. Don't make fun of my black and white printer. And then I finished the radius. So I copied the radius from the photograph. And then I scaled out, using Google Maps, I scaled out Italy. And here's the compass I used to draw my circle. So the compass is, the radius is 25.5, which makes it a 51-inch circle. And Italy is 17.5 inches. So you take 17.5 and you divide it by 51, and you get 34%. So Italy is 34% of the globe. Does Italy look like 34% of the globe?
Do you know why? Because they curve the horizon. They film things and then they CGI it and they curve it. And that's how you know that they're lying to you.
I'm going to go with no. So what you're looking at is high altitude balloon footage. And they're using a fisheye lens to artificially...
See that? That's fake. That's fakery, folks. Can't trust NASA.
Earth. Now, by artificially curving the Earth, you're making the Earth too small. You're making it out of scale. So that 100% proves they're using a fisheye lens. It also proves at high altitude, the horizon's flat, because if it's not flat, it's out of scale. This makes way more sense.
Yeah, and again, there's amateur balloon footage of 110,000 feet in the air, which is straight. So you have to determine when you see that picture, where's this at? Like these kind of pictures, curved from mainstream sources in NASA and SpaceX or whatever else, and then you have amateur footage that tells you it's complete straight, and all these other pieces of evidence that I've shown you that there's no possible way that the Earth could be curved. Somebody's lying, folks, and it's not the Bible, I'll tell you that. Of course, there's also, now I think we'll cover this later with water reflection and so on. So here's the deal. Conclusion from the horizon. There's so many more proofs that you can look at. And again, my point is not to make this an exhaustive list of horizon proofs, but the horizon is one of the major proofs against the globe. Every piece of evidence that we have confirms that the Earth is a plane, and it's motionless. It's not a ball. It's not a curve of any kind. It's impossible for it to be a curve for many reasons. And of course, there's no empirical evidence that it is a curve. There's none. It's all just fakery and illusions and gaslighting and telling you, oh, this is what you're actually seeing. Whereas if you understand the rules of perspective, the rules of, optics and things like that, then you realize that they're just faking you out. Of course, they're either deceived or they're very consciously deceiving you. Horizon is flat. It rises to meet the eyes as you go up because Earth is a plane. It's an infinite plane as far as I'm concerned, but we'll talk more about that later. If the Earth was curved any amount, you have to understand that the horizon could not do what it does. It cannot rise to meet the eye level, and that alone is one of the key ways to destroy the globe. There's a lot of perspective tricks that they use to say that it curves all in front of you and so on, but again, where's the left and right curve? Like all those memes are like, oh, look, it's actually curving this way. Okay, why doesn't it curve this way? Why does it rise to meet your eye level? That's the part that they can't explain, because that is not possible on a ball. How come all the ground photos vanish into the horizon? And they use high altitude ones and say, oh, look, see, the vanishing point's different than the horizon. It must be because of the Earth's curvature. It's just gaslighting. And again, if you aren't questioning your assumptions and you're not questioning their assumptions, it's easy for them to, wiggle their snake tongue in your ear and persuade you. Technology, of course, is exposing all their lies now because people are buying these high-powered cameras and infrared, cameras and things like that, and they're able to observe things that are not possible to be observed. You saw that laser experiment. People are doing experiments now because technology is more available, like with lasers and cameras and things, that prove that this has just been one of the biggest lies of the last 500 years, especially the last 100 years, that's for sure. The LoRa tests, another great test to show people, like, look, there's no possible way that it's a radio line of sight. Oh, but the sea was propagating it through the electric current, and gravity, force, bends the signal around the ocean, and this is nonsense. None of these things have been proven, folks. LoRa is a radio line of sight, and it was an 800-mile distance, or it's 800 miles distance. That's because the Earth is a plane, and it propagated over a plane, not because... I'm sure maybe there's some, aspect that maybe the ocean was helping with that. Who knows? That's possible. But it's not feasible to argue, well, the signal was being bent around a curve. That's nonsense. Because that means what? That means, well, you have to prove curvature. You have to prove that water can be bent. You have to prove that LoRa, which is radio line of sight, can be curved. How is it being curved? Well, because the water, there's no explanation for that. So ultimately, don't accept those explanations because they're bogus. All the evidence that we have is consistent with a flat, motionless plane. Not what NASA tells you, because NASA is full of lies, never a straight answer. They're using fisheye lenses, CGI, constant camera tricks, especially now they're so good at it with all the technology. Just like you have technology, they have technology too. And of course, we'll be exposing some of that as well. But either way, the horizon is one of the simplest and strongest arguments for a plane Earth. Just look. Use your eyes. Again, you don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be an expert on anything. You just look. God gave you a brain and your 5 senses to simply observe creation and see what you live in. You don't have to know how it works all the way, but it's very clear how it doesn't work. Does that make sense? That's the more important point. Horizon is the line that divides the heavens and the earth. There's a spiritual component to everything, folks. When God created the heavens and the earth, he did it in such a way that it would reveal something about him. How much higher are my ways than your ways? Our relationship to God is vertical, right? That's a vertical relationship that cannot be transcended. The only way is through Christ. Christ condescended, meaning came down in human form, crossed that bridge, the infinite bridge for us, and through him we can be like God by being conformed to the image of Christ, being resurrected, and we can participate in that vertical relationship through Christ. The horizon, the earth where we exist, separates the heavens and the earth. There's a separation between earth and heaven, and that's denoted by the horizon line. And of course, to me, that's really poetic, because what do those two lines represent? Well, the symbol on my hat, the cross. The symbol that some people like to comment and say, that's pagan, you got to take that off, you're, idolater, and so on. No, I'm not an idolater for wearing a hat with a cross on it. The cross is a profoundly poetic and beautiful symbol of the crucifixion that Christ endured for us. It's not a crucifix, it's a symbol. And it was symbolized in the Old Testament long before the New Testament. And it's symbolized in the world that you look around. The horizon is a horizontal line where we belong, representing Earth. We are here, we're humans, we're created beings. And the vertical line is our relationship to God as the divine, the Most High. And together, what do you get? You get the God-man, Jesus Christ. You get the reconciliation between justice and mercy. You get the reconciliation between sin and righteousness, between God and man. It's a beautiful symbol, folks, and it's engraved in our very reality. Now, with that, another proof that we'll look at today is water. Water's an easy one. It always finds its level. It can't be bent. Nobody in history has ever bent water. If you're thinking about water droplets, that's not bending water. That's called surface tension, which is a property of water when it has very low volume. Low volume creates little droplets. That's a property of water because water has an electrical component to it. And so it shapes the surface tension, shapes into a sphere if it's a very, very tiny volume. The moment you increase the volume, the surface tension, breaks and it creates the water being level. It fills the form of the container that it's in. So do not let arguments of surface tension confuse you into thinking that the water around the earth is a ball and it could be made into a ball, because that's preposterous. Nobody has ever bent water. And if you could bend water, then we would be in real trouble because we're mostly water. And I talk about that in my 20 Reasons Gravity is a Fraud video. But water can't be bent, folks. It cannot be bent by anything. It's a flat. It fills the container, and it's a level every single time. Which is why if you go to these pictures, like you look at, for example, these reflections on water, this is happening because water is a plane. It's flat, has the face of the water. Well, why do we say face of the water? Because it's flat. That's very important. See, I had a link here that I need to put. Where's it at? Let's see. Yeah, here's a zoom in of these ships. I don't know what distance it's over, but it's called the Curve Buster. 30 miles of zoom. You see that? They went from being able to see it to absorbed by the horizon because, again, the two wavelengths are merging. You see that even the mountains disappeared. So go get yourself a P1000 and flat as a board, beautiful, completely straight. And of course, you shouldn't be able to do that if water was being curved, or which of course is preposterous. It's totally preposterous. Yeah, another thing with this reflection on the face of the water is, so first off, the fact that you can see the straight line of the sun proves that the water is level. And it's not being curved. Because if it were being curved at any degree, when you shine a light on a sphere, you see these inflection points. That's what happens. Of course, the material of the sphere determines that. But you wouldn't see what you would see back here with these straight lines. You see these straight lines that we clearly see when the sun is over the water because the water is level, meaning it's flat for as far as it extends into the horizon. If it were being curved, light would have to hit a tangent point and create these, these basically tangent points, which, by the way, which is why the moon is, that's a whole nother can of worms, but the moon is not a three-dimensional object. It's a 2D projection, very likely. So we've never been on the moon. But if the moon was a sphere, which we're going to debunk quite a bit in this series, then it would have these particular patterns if light was being shown off of it. The moon is not a sphere, and the moon is not being hit with light and reflecting that light. The moon is a light source, and it's some kind of projection, which is a very fascinating thing. So either way, what's the point? The point is that people are deceived, and water and the horizon are very clear proofs for these things. If you can zoom in 30 miles, the earth is not being curved, folks. It's straight. Water is not being curved. People, of course, argue refraction and say, well, you're just seeing that because, light is reflecting and it's creating this hologram. It's bringing it back from the curve. I mean, just all this nonsense. When in reality, if that was the case with refraction, and they love to use the word refraction, they don't realize that refraction actually refutes the globe. And we'll talk about that with Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes, the Greek in, it was like 200 BC or something like that, who supposedly measured these different shadows across the face of the earth and determined so brilliantly that the earth must be a ball, he made a fatal error, and that error was to ignore refraction. And as a result, because he ignored the fact that the light is coming through a prism of some kind, i.e. the firmament, he transferred that refraction onto the curvature of the earth to work the math out. And the math works out fine. Another important point to realize is that math will justify anything if your assumption, it doesn't, let me put it this way, better way to phrase it. Math does not reveal to you the assumption that you're making. Math just confirms whatever you're doing. The math works of the heliocentric model, but it's completely wrong. So hopefully you understand that math working is not a proof of something being true. This is the important distinction, and we'll get more on that later, but try it for yourself. Get a P1000, Nikon P1000. Of course, they're expensive, but if you have the budget, get one, experiment, or do your own experiments. Look for these things for yourself and evaluate the evidence, because you've been lied to if you believe that you're on a ball. It's not possible. Of course, gravity is another one. We talked about it in my 20 Reasons video, so go check that out. Gravity is what ties heliocentrism together. It's the glue. Without gravity, then heliocentrism falls apart. It's completely nonsensical. Gravity has countless inconsistencies, and they're strung together just by haphazard math and assumptions it's all just nonsense. It really is. Heliocentrism is nonsense. It's not science, folks. It really isn't. It's dressed up in science, but it's not really science. It's really not. Creates all sorts of nonsensical situations that you can't prove empirically, but you have to believe. That's why it's a spiritual belief system. You have to believe in this stuff. You're not actually having empirical data that water can bend. There's no empirical data of gravity. We'll talk about the Cavendish experiment. We'll talk about all these things that people think supposedly we've proven gravity. We haven't proven anything. Gravity is a farce. It's a made-up thing. There's no empirical evidence for heliocentrism. All the empirical evidence proves that otherwise. It proves biblical cosmology. It's the ultimate gaslighting, really. And you're going to see this more and more because it just keeps telling you, well, no, this is what's happening. Oh, you see that and you think that's what's happening, but actually it's really what's happening is this. And so the heliocentrist prophets like Neil deGrasse Tyson and, what's his name? Bill Nye and so on. These guys are priests. They're priests that are weaving illusions, and they're gaslighting you and telling you, no, that's not really what's happening. Really what's happening is this. And you have to just take his word for it. And he's so charming, but really it's not based on science whatsoever. It's nonsense. Gravity is completely contradictory to everything we know about science and the rules of physics. And I discussed that in my 20 Reasons video. But you have to accept it. You have to believe it happens and, whatever. But how can you not believe in gravity? Well, yeah, gravity is nonsense. The reason things fall is because they're organized by density. We live in a vertical system, vertically oriented system with God at the top and the earth at the bottom. It's a vertically oriented system. And things that are more dense fall past things that are less dense. And there's a spiritual reason for that too, which I discuss in my 20 Reasons video. Again, everything points back to God, folks. even these things that seem so seemingly materialistic or mundane, like a density gradient or things falling, why do they fall, why do they rise? There's actually a spiritual reason for that. And it's really profound if you understand that all things are made for God's glory. But one more, just to show you that there's no such thing as gravity. And this is from NASA. So many videos like this, folks, and you can look them up for yourself, but this is NASA's card trick. Let's see. Oh, let's turn on the, where's the sound? There it is.
A deck of cards, in addition to trying to play cards, but playing cards in space is actually kind of difficult because as soon as you deal one out, they go flying all the way. But
oh, they sure do. Let's see.
A deck of cards makes another interesting demonstration, which is you can use it as a nice satellite and demonstrate how...
Look at that. There's no gravity, folks. It's free fall. It's zero.
When you spin things along their widest axis, this is called a maximal inertial axis, it flies very stably.
Scientific language, a source of authority. Okay.
If you spin a deck of cards along its thinnest line, its minimal axis, it flies very well. But if you spin a deck of cards or any other block rectangular object in anything other than its maximum or minimum axis, watch what happens. It actually will, here we go, let me see if I can keep the camera here. It'll actually tumble. Do you see how it twists every now and then? That twist is a very unusual phenomenon that is true of spinning objects in space. So a deck of cards...
Spinning objects in space. So far, pretty convincing, right?
Make some very interesting games and demonstrations that you can do in space. Some of you may be familiar with the old experiment about the hammer and the feather. Well, in this case, our feather will be played here by this four of spades. And you may expect everything up here in microgravity to float, because most everything does float.
No, 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 no.
Oops. Oh. Oh. And people still believe that there's a giant space station floating around in the sky when they see things like this. How can you possibly, if somebody cheated on you once, would you need to catch them like another 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times to, have a divorce? I mean, come on, folks. There are so many videos like this. And this is this is a ridiculous one, but there's so many like this to prove to you that what they're doing is just constant fakery. Now, the question is, if that's the case, and these people are parading, like what's the only possible explanation? The explanation is that they're in some kind of studio and they're doing all kind of tricks with cameras and CGI. And of course, they also use planes for free falls and using the free fall and making it look like they're in space. So it's not like, something happened there was a mistake, in a, how should I put this? Like, it's very clear to him. He knows what he's doing. That's what I'm trying to say. He knows what he's doing. And he messed up. That means that he's very conscious of his lies. He's lying to you. And of course, all these astronauts are, secret society members as well, that you don't get to be an astronaut unless you're drinking the devil's cup, because you're a magician at that point. You're doing magic tricks to wow, the false prophet. Of course, I'm not saying NASA is the false prophet. I'm saying NASA is part of the false prophet, which is the United States, to wow people with all these signs and wonders, which is really Roman Catholic cosmology. Cosmology, the heliocentric cosmology, is Roman Catholic Roman Catholicism. And we'll talk about that in the heliocentric conspiracy. But the point is, this guy knows what he's doing. He's lying to you blatantly. Now, put one and one together. He's lying to you. They're going through all this trouble to lie to you. That's a serious deal. That means they're lying to you about everything. They're lying to you about everything they're doing with the moon, with Mars, with the ISS, with these rocket missions. Everything needs to be scrutinized. And if that's the case, do they have the incentive to lie to you? Of course they do. NASA has something like, 56 million per day or billion or however much money they get. Are they incentivized to lie to you? Of course they are. One of the greatest money laundering schemes in history. So you need to realize when you see these things that there's no such thing as a space station. There is, in the sense that they have a studio But there's no space. The space is where we live. We live in the space between the waters above and the waters below that God created. There is no space that you go to, and there's nobody in space. Nobody's been to space. They've been to high altitude. They've sent high altitude balloons there. NASA's the largest consumer of helium. You can look this up. And they consume, I forget how many, millions and millions of tons of helium. But either way, the point is that why do they use helium? Well, because they're full of hot air. That's one. But really, because they're using hot air balloons for satellites. There's no such thing as satellites. There's no such thing as, everything you've been lied to. It's one giant lie. And when you realize that, you realize, wow, everything I've been told is an illusion. Everything I've been told about everything is a lie. I can only trust the Bible. I can only trust Christ. This is a world of smoke and mirrors. Everywhere you turn, there's no truth. There's nothing but lies or half-truths. So there's no gravity, and no gravity means no ball, because gravity is what ties everything together in the heliocentric model. So learn those points in that 20 Reasons video so that you can refute gravity, because every time somebody says, well, it's the refraction, well, what are you assuming? You're assuming that the Earth is a ball and that gravity is doing this. But if there's no gravity, then your argument falls to shreds. So learn to refute gravity, because gravity is one of the major arguments against heliocentrism. And without gravity, you don't have heliocentrism. It's not possible, because gravity is the thing that ties it all together. I do not have explanations for everything. You'll see later in the series that there are things that are mystery, and that's okay. We don't need to have explanations for everything. But you do need to know the things that aren't true. There's no gravity, there's no curvature, water is level, and of course, the gospel and Christianity are incompatible with heliocentrism for several reasons. Sin, the nature of creation, the return of Christ, the atonement. There's a lot of things I talk about in that video. It's a short video, it's fun, it's animated. Watch it, share it with your friends. Get familiar with the reality that what the Bible teaches about these things, about the resurrection, the return of Christ, being created in God's image, they're not compatible with a heliocentric model of the universe where you have infinite possibilities. You have a bunch of different aliens and advanced life forms, and an ever-expanding universe faster than the speed of light that is impossible to basically traverse. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. It doesn't match what Christianity through the gospel tells us. It doesn't match at all. And of course, we're going to have a deeper dive at that particular topic at the end of this series. But what is walking the narrow road? What is walking the narrow road? The walking the narrow road with this particular topic is understanding a few things. This particular series that I'm doing with cosmology is not designed to be a defense against flat Earth. It's really not. I'm not a flat earther. I don't want you to be a flat earther. I don't want you to identify with that movement, because it's controlled opposition and it's being used to discredit the truth, as usual. I don't think it's wrong to call it a flat earth, but I try to avoid, say, biblical earth, biblical cosmology, and so on. I think that you just want to distance yourself from this particular movement because it's infiltrated. My goals with this series in particular are to help people be free from the spell of heliocentrism and to realize that it's wrong, that it's a lie, and that it has evil agendas. Hopefully you've realized that in just this first episode. And ultimately to return to a biblical faith of cosmology. It's also very important, I want to cover both sides, because we always want to walk the narrow road here. One side is the heliocentric model, and the other side is the controlled narrative. Counter-narrative, I should say. It's always two narratives, folks. You have to realize the devil covers both bases. That's why you have to walk the narrow road. The other side is the flat earth movement. And basically being free of the deception of that controlled opposition, which is designed to discredit the truth, to be easily refutable. And there's a lot of good points that the Globers make against the circle model. We're going to be looking at that and why it can't be a circle. So you have to divorce this flat earth movement because you'll be easily discredited is the point. And that's the point, to shuffle you into a counter narrative that is easy to discredit, a straw man. So the point is to avoid both of these extremes, the heliocentric model and the flat earth movement. What's the narrow road? Well, the narrow road is biblical cosmology. What do I define that as? Well, you have a flat, motionless earth. You have a flat plane. It's not a curved ball that you're on. It's motionless. It's not moving. The earth is stationary. It's the luminaries in the sky that's moving around us. It has local light sources, the sun, moon, and stars. God is close. He's nearby. He's right above the firmament. And it's an enclosed system. That's about as simple and basic as I can make it. As far as the size and position of the moon, what other things, again, like volcanoes or whatever else, I don't know. I really don't. There's a lot of interesting theories, and we'll probably talk about a few of them, but they don't matter. It doesn't matter that you need to know every in and out of the system or even how it looks on a whole. You need to know that the Earth is not a ball spinning in space, and you need to not be seduced by the new agey, trendy circle Earth, flat Earth movement, because that's a deception as well. So this is it. This is the universe, folks. You're in it. You are in the universe. God has created countless things to reveal his glory. Every day we're discovering new things. There's no other planets. There's no other places of intelligent life. There's no Pleiadians. They're just demons and fallen angels impersonating alien creatures to deceive people. And the narrow road is understanding that the Earth is flat. It's a flat plane, but that the flat Earth movement is a psyop. That's the narrow road. And we're going to have some very interesting episodes on this particular discussion. I've come to reject the circle model for many important reasons that I will share with you in this series. I don't know what the Earth as a system looks like as a whole. I have some ideas, but I really don't know, to be honest with you. And I think that's an intellectually honest and wise position to hold, because the more you really are scientific, the more you investigate these things, the more you realize there's more questions. There's things that don't make sense. There's things that seem to be contradictory. The science seems to point us in two different directions, in different places. It's very interesting. We're going to look at these problems, I promise you. And again, the goal is not to find the answer necessarily. The goal is to marvel. Because if the Earth is not a circle, and let's say it's some kind of plane, a square, how do you have continuity? That's the question. And maybe what we're living in, not a simulation, but it's something so profoundly supernatural that it is far beyond anything anybody could imagine. And that's my point, is that when you realize that, you marvel. That's all you can do, because that's what you were made for. You were made to marvel. You weren't made to know everything. God created science and physics and chemistry and gave us brilliant brains that we could determine these things and study them and analyze them and create graphs and create hypotheses and test them and isolate the independent variable and all these different things. And science is beautiful. Science is fun. It's about discovery and empirical testing and getting proof and evidence. You should be scientific in how you study the Bible in that sense. But we weren't made to arrive at the fullness of the answer. Do you get it? The whole process of discovery and testing and evidence is so that you can marvel. God is actually very generous with evidence. When he resurrected and Thomas was doubting, he said, "Go here, put your hand in my hand, put your hand in my side. I want you to have the evidence." Why? So that Thomas could understand the mechanics of the resurrection and what exactly happened and how Jesus' cells came back to life? No. So he could marvel. Do you get it? Evidence and experimentation and testing things is good. You should build your faith on evidence. Biblical evidence, historical evidence, scientific evidence. God has been so generous with evidence, but he hasn't given you evidence so that you could try to know everything. He's given you evidence so that you could learn enough to realize, wow, I don't know anything, and I can marvel at the brilliance of God. That's the point. So that's the point with this particular series, is to give you ample evidence of many things. I'm going to cover a lot of evidence. Hopefully I've given you some good evidence today. But really, that evidence is there to push you over the edge into the mystery and to ask even more questions and to wonder and to marvel at the brilliance of God. Now, very important, another distinction is the term geocentric. Geocentric can be a misnomer. There are people who believe in a geocentric universe, but they believe we're on a ball. And we'll look at one of those people later in this series. He's on YouTube. He's got some great videos about certain experiments we're going to be looking at that prove that the Earth is motionless, but he is a geocentrist, meaning he believes the Earth is the center of the universe, but he still believes in a ball Earth, which is really strange. But either way, there are people like that. Geocentric just means Earth is the center. But the question is, what kind of Earth? Are we talking about an enclosed, flat, motionless plane? Are we talking about a ball model Earth, which was, what people believed, or believed a little bit with some of the early things in the 1500s. Geocentric just means ball Earth, but in space. But space is the place that we live in. It's not this external void. The Bible says that there were waters. God separated the waters above from the waters below, created a space, basically, and that's where everything lives. It's under the firmament. So according to the Bible, we live in space, not outside of it or whatever. This is why I like to say biblical cosmology. And very important that we distinguish biblical cosmology from not just creating, like God creating the earth and saying, yeah, I believe God. Well, yeah, if you don't believe God created the earth, then you're not a Christian. You have to believe Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If you don't believe that first line of the Bible, then you're not in any stage of faith. So you have to believe that. But the question is, what did he create? That's an important point. Geocentrism can be deceiving in that sense, and so is flat Earth, because flat Earth is controlled opposition. It's New Agey. You'll see how it's got the same, kind of aspects as the heliocentric model. It's just controlled opposition. Biblical cosmology is the best term I could think of. It's the most relevant. It ties it to the Bible, and it helps you avoid the counterfeits, just like religious nationalism with Christian nationalism. So, final thoughts as we wrap today up. I hope this has been a fun little beginning for you. We're going to get into much more depth and research, I promise you, in the coming episodes. If your mind is open, I hope that what we will cover will blow your mind. I really do, because it's blown my mind. And again, I hope that it helps you arrive at a place of mystery and awe and marveling at God, and that the world you live in, it's truly a supernatural realm. So make sure you subscribe, by the way, to my website. Just another reminder, because I never know how these people might do things with this particular series. So best place to do that is my website, danceoflife.com. I want you also to realize that you're in a spiritual war. And if you've watched my videos, you know that. You're not ignorant to that, but you're on a war on many fronts. That's why I decided to make a series for all the major teachings of Christianity. The Trinity, the Sabbath, the afterlife, the nature of the church, salvation, which I haven't done yet, which I plan on doing after this one, cosmology, the afterlife, and so on. All these are major threads, and the war is on all 7 of those fronts. And if you are not wise as a serpent on each of these topics, it's very easy to get swept up in deception. So you have to know the truth on these things, and hopefully I've done a good job of creating resources for you to be edified. Nevertheless, Satan has always wanted to play God and to be God, so he's made many counterfeits to introduce his spiritual system. Heliocentrism is a counterfeit cosmology. It's a counterfeit cosmology, and because cosmology cannot be divorced from the gospel, cannot be divorced from who God is, accepting a counterfeit cosmology allows Satan to present his counterfeit salvation to you. Do you understand? Whether that's transhumanism, New Age, quantum, whatever, climate change gospel, New World Order, whatever it is, there's all kinds of threads we talked about. But accepting the false cosmology, if you accept the true cosmology, you cannot accept the counterfeit. Does that make sense? Or let me put it this way, at least it makes it harder to accept the counterfeit, because there's other fronts, right? Like salvation and, so on and so forth that we've talked about. Either way, because you can be, for example, you could be believing in biblical cosmology, but be a Christian nationalist. Although, I don't know, it'd be interesting to study to see how much crossover that is. But either way, biblical cosmology really makes it harder to accept a counterfeit. And that's the point. If you believe heliocentrism, then accepting counterfeits is much easier. That's the point. Next time, we're going to look at what the Bible says, very in-depth. We're going to look at verses that should not be used to prove cosmology, biblical cosmology. We're going to look at verses that could go either way, that again should be avoided or should be secondary. And we're going to look at verses that are beyond a shadow of a doubt, proof that the Bible is making explicit cosmological statements. They're not just poetry, they're not just, matter of fact, they're explicit cosmological statements, which are irreconcilable with heliocentrism. And those, again, are the ones that you focus on in your debates. You don't focus on, the ones that are weaker in supporting your argument. You focus on the core, the head of the snake. That's what you hopefully will realize how to do through this series. Today was more about just opening things up, kind of glancing at certain things, again, looking at the key arguments, the horizon, the water, gravity, and the gospel and the incompatibility of Christianity with heliocentrism. And of course, we're going to do more and more deep dives as we go forward. But a lot of people have resistance to this truth, unfortunately. They have resistance, and they think you're an idiot for believing a flat plane with an enclosed cosmology. It's like, okay, well, it actually takes more faith to believe in heliocentrism than it does to accept what your eyes tell you and what empirical evidence tells you. So that's an important point, but I wish you Godspeed in your journey to help the people around you come out of this deception. We will get very deep with this, that I can promise you. But until then, I want you to reflect on a couple things. You've been lied to about a lot. Everything except what the Bible says. The Bible tells you the truth. Jesus Christ is the truth. But outside of that, fair game for the devil, and most of everything we've learned ever has been lies. The question is it possible you've been lied to about reality and cosmology? There's a huge motive for Satan to lie to you. Does that motive make it even more plausible that you've been lied to? These are things you should ask yourself if you believe in heliocentrism, and these are things you should ask your friends who are still in that deception very candidly. Do you believe you're learning all these lies? Is it possible you've been lied to about cosmology? And with all the incentives the devil has, would that make it even more plausible? What would it mean if God is actually intimately nearby his creation? What would that mean? What would it mean if you realize that the earth is more mysterious than you could ever imagine? That you live in a supernatural realm that is beyond any intellectual comprehension. It's not beyond intellectual appreciation, but it's beyond intellectual comprehension. This is our starting point. This is our starting point, folks. It's our starting point. It's the starting point of adventure and mystery into something that is going to be very profound. I want you to wonder. I want you to reconnect to your childhood, to your imagination. We used to play with all kinds of toys, dinosaurs, whatever, and nothing was beyond our imagination. And yet we've become reasonable, and we've learned to listen to the snake as the authority that says, oh, no, this is how it works. Oh, it's just that. Oh, it's just refraction. Oh, it's just the curvature of the other. Oh, it's just that. Rather than using what God gave us to ultimately arrive at a mystery and marvel. When we were kids, we used to watch space shows and things like that, but ultimately life taught you at some point, whether it was at 10 years old or 15 or 20 or whatever else, to buy into the illusion. And if you are still in that illusion, I hope that hopefully you're coming out of it. There's an example that I've heard used before of flea training in the circus, that they used to train fleas, jumping fleas. And what they would do to train these fleas is that they would put them in jars with lids on top. And so the flea would hit its head on the lid, and eventually it would start jumping lower. And at that point, the flea was trained. You could take the jar off, the jar lid off, and the flea would not escape because it would be too afraid of the barrier. And so this is the point. There's a barrier in people's thinking with everything, not just with heliocentrism, with everything, because they've been brainwashed. They've been deceived. And look, I was brainwashed too. I loved sci-fi. I've told you that. So there's no shame in admitting that you've been brainwashed or deceived. There's no shame. We've all been deceived. It's part of the growing pains. But my encouragement to you, if you still believe in heliocentrism, is to be courageous. Be courageous and look beyond what you think is comfortable or tradition or what you think is true, and indulge the evidence. Hopefully today was enough evidence, and along with those other 2 videos, the short ones, to start cracking that shell a little bit. If you believe the truth and you are into biblical cosmology and you have discussions with people, then encourage them to be courageous. Entertain the evidence. Just look at the evidence, folks. The evidence is always there. And my promise to you is that on the other side, you're going to find great mystery and awe and joy in all that God has made. That's what this series is all about. So, welcome to the Cosmology series. I hope you've had a good time, and I'm looking forward to the next one. We'll see you next week. Take care, and God bless.